12th regularly scheduled City of Port Orchard Council meeting. I'd like to call that meeting to order. And if you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On behalf of the City of Port Orchard, welcome, and we'll start right out with citizen comments. And I would like to just make an announcement. We have a new addition to our citizens' comments, and it's a series of lights over here by the clerk's desk. And what will happen is when you start making your comments, we'll have a green light for 2 minutes. At 1 minute, a yellow light comes on, and then when the red light comes on, the 3 minutes are up. So what we're really going to try to do is concentrate on keeping everybody's comments fair and equal. So that's, if you're wondering about the lights over there, that's what it's about. So we'll be testing them out today. And the first person that has signed up is Paula. Is it Ryan? And my last announcement is if you want to tell us your name, fine. Of course, you wrote it here, so I said it. But if you don't want to, that's fine also. There's no rule that says you have to. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
My name is Paula Ryan. I currently live in Seattle, but I was born at Tacoma General Hospital. I grew up on Dogwood Hill, just down the street here. I spent the first 5 years of my life there. My sister Arlene, she owns the house over at 1763 Bay Street. And it's one of the homes that's that might be torn down because of the proposed pedestrian path. You know, as a former staff member for the King County Council, I'm really familiar with how these processes work. I'm really familiar with how these decisions are made. You know, as any good public commenter, I've read through the staff reports, the SEPA analysis, the draft plans, the decisions. I've looked at it all. But one of the things I've noticed while I was reading through everything, why is the fact that people's homes are being torn down buried in these reports? Why do I have to wade through to find information regarding how the City Council is exercising eminent domain through cleverly disguised language like removing man-made structures or exercising municipal authority? Makers, you know that good policy results in the economic vibrancy and sustainability of a town. Since when does good policy include tearing down people's homes, taking away future memories? And to that, I say shame on you. Shame on you, City Council. Have you once considered how incredibly invasive and violating it feels for my sister and her neighbors to be told that their homes are going to be torn down so that strangers can walk on their property? You know, consideration has been made for the bull trout and the marbled mullet, but not my sister's home. Like I said, I know how these meetings work, and I know you've all made up your mind, so but I still have an ask to make. Please, please adequately compensate my sister and her neighbors. Please give them fair value for not only their property, but for their pain and suffering and for the loss of enjoyment of life. When my sister and her husband got their home, they put in for a 30-year mortgage expecting 30 years of incredible memories, not 7 years of memories, culminating in watching their home be torn down. Shame on you. Do the right thing.
Thank you. Arlene Williams.
Hi, Council.
Hi.
My name's Arlene Williams. I live at 1763 Bay Street. I cried last time, so I'm going to go with facts this time. Just wanted to talk about the appraisal. I'm sure you've read all 100 pages of it. That was something that I've been gifted this spring. Thank you so much. But I just want to, the way they did the appraisal is they did land and homes. And the land, I have a $5,000 lot that's only accessible by water, a $14,000 lot over on Hood Canal on the Union side. not near, I mean, and the $5,000 one is Gig Harbor, but it's unincorporated, it's not downtown. You know where our property is, it's accessible. I mean, there's the comparables are stretching. The house comparables, they're all over the lower south end. And it includes one house in Port Orchard, the White House down the street that belongs to Norman Ray. And that one sold in 2011. The comparables are all from last summer, 2013. They've adjusted with math, but I don't know, I wasn't very impressed with the appraisals. The house on the corner, the brown one, just sold this last fall for $489,000. So just to give you some perspective, but that wasn't included in the appraisal because it hadn't, the sale was complete after the appraisal was done. I'm done. You've worn me out. I really have nothing more to say. The other comments, I have a statement from John Hayes and Ocean Williams. Would you like me to start those now?
No, we'll give them their 3 minutes too, also, so.
Oh, I'm done with my portion. I succeed, Mayor. I'm done. But I have statements from them that they gave me unable to attend
I
tonight.
see, they're not going to be able to make the statements.
Ocean's working and John.
If they're long statements, we still need to start the timer over and give them.
That's fine, you can start them, they're short, yeah.
Yeah, let's, if you're ready to make a statement from one of the others,
Yes.
then, okay.
Okay. Push the wrong button. Here's Ocean's statement.
Okay.
The email I sent the council in May, on May 29th, led to a scenario in which the homeowners would be responsibly compensated for the incentivize them to choose total acquisition. As far as we are aware, none of the homeowners of these homes are seeking for the sale of their homes. We will speak for ourselves. As for us, if we were to vacate our homes, we anticipate some unwelcome potential hardships, for example, practical inconvenience and emotional loss. Adequate compensation for our home and property may help interests in ongoing help with hardships. We would not be opposed to the process if the homeowners had choices, for example, to accept the offers, settle administratively, or reject the offers. In our opinion, the latter possibility, a homeowner who does not accept the city's offer, necessitate a willingness on the part of the city to explore other options that do not require total acquisition. We believe that such options do exist. In summary, we've considered the information you have sent. We support the city pursuing the next steps toward a completion of the Bay Street pathway, since it could be a great asset to the city and the people of Port Orchard. We are interested in considering an offer from the city for our home, which may or may not lead to total acquisition, depending on whether we foresee a way where we could be compensated sufficiently to choose to vacate the home. In the case that it offers by the city for total acquisition, homes, I'm sorry, I'm reading Ocean's words. In the case that offers by the city or offer by the city for total acquisitions was rejected and not settled by the homeowner's choice, we do not believe further action toward total acquisition of homes would be in the best option available to the city and its inhabitants and whom you represent. At this point, however, we do not oppose the city making offers and negotiating via Universal Field Services with the homeowners. Thank you for considering our comments, and thank you for working on behalf of the people of the city of Port Orchard. So that's Ocean Williams, my husband's statements, and he also resides at 1763.
All right, thank you.
And then
If
these
you
are
just
from,
give us a moment, did you restart again? Yeah, okay.
love technology. These are comments from John Haynes, and he is at, I think it's 1751. He's the white, the blue house over the water in the middle. He said, Arlene, can you mention this in the meeting? I probably won't be there. And he wants to ask you, why can't you just make Bay Street a one-lane road for a few years and see how it works? Why would you throw us out not knowing this could be the right answer? I'm one of the 6 people that uses the trail daily and would like to know and would like to keep my house. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, those were the statements of folks that had signed up. Now, don't let that stop you from wanting to make a statement. Just raise your hand and yes, sir, please come on up. Once again, I'll remind you, if you want to leave your name, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine also, whichever works best for you.
My name is Franklin Rusk. I live at 1777 Bay Street. I always have something ready to say to you guys, but every time I come in this room, I just get shaky and I get a little emotional. But all I want to say is, why do I have to move so some yuppie can drive miles away from their house, park down in Annapolis, and ride on my property? It's not right. It really isn't. And besides, when they park at Annapolis, most of the percentage of the bikers go to Manchester. And we've been hearing a lot of problems My mom was county sergeant here up at the jail her whole career until she retired, and they're always had problems with bicyclists on that. Let the county worry about that. This is the city. You guys don't go past Annapolis, so let the county worry about that. You guys just leave our homes alone.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. We'll flip a coin. All right, this lady is already 3/4 of the way there. You're next, okay?
Hi, my name's Noelle Russell. I'm from Modesto, California, and we came to Port Orchard to stay at a house that is apparently in the way of your bike path. So I just wanted to let you know that the house that we're staying at has a lovely area for us to look across the bay. It's very nice. That's what brought us to your town. And sorry we're late, but of course we're vacationing. And I did hear somebody suggest a one-way street, and that's what we were thinking is, why don't they just put this road on a diet, make it a one-way street, slow the traffic down, and then you have, you don't want to have people biking and jogging on that busy street anyway. People go too fast, and it's too busy. So that would just be my suggestion, and preserve those lovely homes that you have, and offer people an opportunity to come here and enjoy your town. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
My name is Amanda Moen. My husband, Chris Moen, has been working for Banter Charters for 10 to 15 years. We really do depend on the work that it provides our family, and we definitely hope that Randy and his family can stay here where it's ideal for his boating business to be stationed. So, thank you.
Thank you. Please.
My name's Mary. I'm from Fort Worth, Texas.
Why,
And
Mary?
the reason that I'm staying in Port Orchard is because of the location and the beautiful home that I'm staying on, which is on the water. I came to Seattle. I don't know anything about the state of Washington, but when I found this particular home on the water, it was exactly what I was looking for, and that's the reason my friends and I came here. So I just wanted to let you know that. Thank you.
Well, thank you and welcome to Port Orchard. We're glad you're here. Yes, please.
Nancy Donlin, and I live on Perry Street, Perry Avenue North, I should say. I live just above the first two homes that are on the water. And in good conscience, I could never ask anybody to leave their home for a path. I think the path is a great idea, but I really can't support tearing the homes down. I guess I could support just a moratorium on fixing them and let them go a natural way. And I believe that it's a great idea to bring out all ideas. When you have a problem and you want to solve it, I always encourage, no matter how crazy the ideas are, bring them all out and everybody talk about them. That way that you leave no stone unturned. As I understand it, Bay Street has approximately 12 to 15,000 cars that go through that street every day. If you were to turn that into a one-way street and then have the other one-way street up on Perry Avenue, it's nothing short of laughable. Perry Avenue is a narrow road and parking is at a premium. There are cars parked everywhere and it's a very narrow road. You can't have 6,000 cars driving down that road. Some people's front doors are right out by the street. It would just be insane. So while I do agree that it's a great idea to bring up everything, every solution possible, I think that one it just isn't going to fly. There's also a 90-degree corner at the end of Perry Street. I can't imagine 6,000 cars going down around a 90-degree corner every day. And I don't know who proposed the idea, but I think they ought to go up there and stand on Perry Avenue for about 20 minutes and just see the traffic that we do have is about the limit that we can stand. 6,000 cars, holy mackerel. I mean, that's a lot of cars. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish? Yes, please.
Good evening. I'm going to speak on an unrelated subject, but I do also endorse the present condition of Bay Street, and I don't believe in taking other people's homes. As you may remember, I recently brought up that I would like some sort of confirmation councilpersons had not only received my emails, but had also read them. I was pleased to receive replies to the questions I had posed via email from councilpersons Beck, Chang, and Cartwright the very next day after bringing this up during public comments. I was and am grateful for their attentive responses. Keep in mind, my emails were sent to all the councilpersons. That being said, I recently attended the last Finance Committee meeting at the Pancake House. It can be observed at minute 46 on audio where Councilman Childs brought up the subject of his concern over Councilman City emails, his concern being spurred by the recent required open public meetings training. During this conversation, it was brought up that the system was cumbersome. Mr. Childs stated he thought the city email was probably a disaster by now because he hadn't opened it in roughly a year. Mr. Clausen said he had only been there once. Mr. Putansu said he uses his work email and CCs himself for a record. During all this conversation, no mention was made of the needs of the public. How does one translate this lack of interest? If it is a problem and there is interest in improving the system, why has it taken a required OPM class to spur interest? I really do try to be a contributing citizen. I do not understand this blatant disregard for those who are trying to use the systems put in place to contact our elected officials. If this is not a viable way to interact with our councilpersons, we should not be led to believe it is otherwise. This is not the kind of leadership I expect from those who have been elected to represent us. Where is the burning desire to know what the people are thinking or to hear their suggestions? You are the people we have trusted to represent us. The end of the meeting commented that there was a lack of thanks for the councilpersons. I want you to know I do thank and I will thank when the issue is corrected. Thank you.
All right, is there? Yes, sir. All right, take your time. We'll wait.
Good evening, folks. Randy Jones, Venture Charters, down on Bay Street. I'm calm tonight. You all know I've been here since I was 18, bought my house at 19, and I've rebuilt it and rebuilt it. And been doing my charter service for 15 years. We now run over 1,000 people through our boat, through our 2 boats, and have 5 employees. And have integrated my home into our charter service, and we have an almost sold out apartment through most of the year. In the event you do take our home, I did give the city 3 options. One of those options is now gone. I had a house that I would have moved to that would have kept my business here. But in the event you do take my home, I still will not go willingly. And we've got a lawyer to represent us. But if I lose this battle, I will take my business out of Port Orchard and will consider going into retirement. But City of Bremerton, if I do keep the charter boats running, will get our business. And at some point in time, the City of Bremerton may force us to do so anyway. We run our boats over there, but our business base is here in Port Orchard, and the sales tax for, our 150,000 in gross sales goes to the City of Port Orchard. It will not if I lose this fight, and nor will the vacation rental. All my tenants are. Just thank you again, Mary, for coming up. for both of you coming up tonight. And other tenants have all, they come because it's a very unique house. You can get 20 different vacation rentals in the city of Port Orchard and Bremerton, and they're all just another house. Ours isn't. But again, I want to stay in, I want to be proud of my city at this point in time. If this is realistically the option, I'm not proud of this city anymore. I was proud to have moved from Bremerton to here, but if this is really if I'm forced out, I'm not proud. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. I would like to make a citizen's comment as Citizen Tim, not Mayor Tim. So would you take over for just a few minutes for me, please? I don't know if, Greg, do we need to do that, or should I just?
I think if you are intending to make a comment in your private capacity, not as mayor, that you should step down and speak from the pulpit.
I'm Tim Mathis. I live at 401 Bothwell Street in Port Orchard. I've lived here about almost 40 years in the South Kitsap area. I'll tell you, I too, like some of these folks back here, I'm not very happy about this whole process. My position is a trail, a pathway should never be the dividing and the deciding factor of taking somebody's home. Just not for me. I have to sit up here and run meetings and not comment on a lot of things, but in this particular case, as a citizen, I don't want to take and see any of these folks their homes being taken. So I'm just against this. There's too many other options. Of course, the most obvious option is pay back the $300,000 and don't go down that road at all. That's an option. I would look at all the options and maybe even a few that we haven't looked at. I agree with that. But the upshot, as far as I'm concerned, is that we should never, ever, ever take somebody's house for this trail. It shouldn't happen. Thank you. Any other comments? Please. And then you, sir.
I don't live in this area that's being discussed, and I have not seen this report. I'm kind of coming in here blind. But in my recollection, this was just supposed to be a kind of a study. When did it go from a study to where people are being told that their property value is worth this and the city is going to take it? Because that hasn't happened here. So that's happening behind the scenes someplace if it hasn't happened here, and that shouldn't be happening. It should be public. Also, of all the meetings that I've been to and the people that have been here talking, there aren't many citizens in this community that want to see anybody lose their home for a walking path when it could be done some other way. Get a group of citizens from this area that are concerned and have them put out some ideas and discuss it and come back with something that's viable instead of having it just be somebody's initial plan that none of us had any real input into. This is ridiculous that you're even thinking about destroying people's homes for a walking path. Thank you.
Thank you. Was a gentleman had his hand up back there?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Steve Hackelberg. I also am with Venture Charters. I've been here off and on. My last duty station was in Bremerton. I've been here off and on since 1998. And honestly, I find it reprehensible that you would take somebody's home for any reason. I understand there may be some, but to take somebody's home to build a path, I can't see that happening. And to top that off, I have a wife and 3 children. If the captain loses his home, chances are he's going to retire and shut his business down, and that leaves me without a job. I understand you guys are weighing a lot of options here. There's a lot of things up in the air. But it's hitting everybody from the top to the bottom, from business owners to the small people on the street like me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else? Please.
My name's
If you'd lift the mic up, and that way we're recorded and it'd be a better recording. Thank you.
My name's Tom Kabalak. I've grown up in this area. I live out in Mason County, but I've worked with Brandy and Venture Charters off and on for the last 10 years. And just like Steve said, I have a wife and 2 kids. If that house goes, the business is gone. There's no way he's going to keep trying to make that work without having the accessibility that he has to the boat from his house because of where it's located. And I can't even believe that anyone would think it okay to move someone out of their house, let alone someone like Randy, who contributes to the community. He's been here as long as I've known him, and I've known him for 15 years. He's a big part of this area. You mentioned Venture Charters, and everybody recognizes it. I can't see somebody taking his house for a walking path. That's really all I have to say.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Yes, sir.
Whittleton, might as well make it unanimous. I think I'm the only one that hasn't spoken. For public safety, I can understand taking a home. For public recreation, I just don't get it. That's my take on it. Thank you.
Okay. Any others? Okay, thanks everyone for your comments. We'll move on to approval of the agenda. Are there any amendments to the published agenda, Council? Yes, sir, Mr. Thompson.
Move to amend the agenda by adding a new business item, 7E, approval of the purchase and sale agreement regarding 640 Bay Street. And I understand we'll have an executive session also.
All right, so you're proposing to add 7E?
Yes.
Business item? Okay.
I'll need one.
I second
All right,
it.
we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that proposal? Seeing none, all those in favor of adding 7E, business item, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Our motion passes. Thank you. Is there anything else? All right.
The agenda as presented.
Thank
or
you.
Amended.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended. Is there a second? We have a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the amended agenda, say aye.
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 Nay. That motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any amendments to the consent agenda? What is your pleasure?
I move to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda as published. All those, is there any discussion or changes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we're at the number 5 presentation portion of our meeting. So we have a guest, Brianna Taylor, a legislative update from Olympia, and time's going fast. It'll be starting up pretty quick, so welcome.
I'm going to adjust the microphone downward.
Okay.
Evening, I'm Brianna Taylor with Gordon Thomas Honeywell Governmental Affairs, and I have Alex Soldano with me tonight as well. And we continue to work on your behalf as your lobbyists in Olympia. I'm here tonight to give you an update of what we expect the 2015 legislative session. I've provided you with a handout that has two documents. One is going over the materials I'm going to verbally explain to you on what to expect in the 2015 session. And the other is your legislative priorities from last year. My hope is that this evening will be a precursor to a discussion in a work session format later this fall when you guys can revise those legislative priorities and update them for the 2015 legislative session. With that, I'm going to dive into what to expect in 2015, and then I'll take questions from all of you. I'll also note that you all should be continuing to get email reports from me. You should have gotten one after the primary that outlined the results of the primary election, and I'll continue to send those as well. So in addition to these verbal presentations, you should also be getting those via email. So the 2015 legislative session is scheduled to start in the second week of January, and it is a long legislative session. The long legislative session occurs on odd-numbered years, and the legislature is charged with developing their biennial budgets. There are three budgets. There's an operating, a transportation, and a capital budget. This year, that long session is anticipated to go even longer than usual. In fact, I think as many of you know, I am working on planning my wedding, and I am planning it around a very, very long legislative session. They would typically adjourn in April. This year, most legislators are saying they will adjourn at the end of June. I'm planning my wedding for September. So for some understanding of what it is we're going to be looking at in terms of time length this next legislative session, you can use that as a forecast. So I'm going to go through and explain the status of each budget and the challenges that each will face. In previous years, your legislative priorities have aligned with these budgets. You've had requests in each budget area. So keep that in mind as we go through these. The first is a transportation budget. The transportation budget is something we have spent quite a bit of time discussing. The current transportation budget, funded out of current gas tax revenues, is anticipated to run out of revenue. That has then prompted the legislature to have a conversation about how to raise revenue through a gas tax increase. It was in the 2013 legislative session, we saw our first transportation revenue package come forward. And it was a proposal that included funding for a number of different things. The Bay Street pedestrian path was one of those. And unfortunately, that proposal did not pass. We are now looking at, we've seen 5 or 6 different transportation revenue package proposals since then throughout the 2014 session. And again, there's not been agreement and nothing has passed. As we look to the 2015 session, we expect those conversations to continue, but we also expect some of the main disagreement points to continue as well, which means it's unclear whether or not legislators in Olympia will be able to reach an agreement on how to raise revenue, how to spend revenue, and what systems need to be made to the what reforms need to be made to the transportation system to do so. Regionally, there has been a more recent conversation in the last 3 months or so, and I've spoken to many of you individually about this, where Kitsap County, Mason County, and the Gig Harbor and areas of unincorporated Pierce County on the peninsula would like to work together more regionally in aligning our transportation priorities. They've observed how other regions throughout the state, such as Snohomish County, have coordinated amongst all the different cities, counties, and stakeholder groups around one project list. They've then gone to Olympia utilizing that one project list and advocated with one voice. They've supported each other in the projects that are in various areas of the region, and because of that, they've been able to get more support for their projects in Olympia, and they've been included in more of the transportation revenue package proposals we have seen. In July, a meeting of this region was occurred that Mayor Mathis was at and Councilmember Ashby, where you saw all of the local electeds that are city electeds, as well as Mason County, Kitsap County, and Councilmember Clausen, you were there as well, I believe. Sorry about that. And Gig Harbor representatives, as well as economic development folks. Your chambers were present as well. And they all sat around a room and said, do we want to work together regionally, and do we think we can all come together with regard to one project list and advocate as a region in Olympia. And the resounding result of that meeting was yes, that yes, they did want to work together as a region. And to move that process forward, they created a steering committee. And that steering committee would start to look at the various projects, would start to look at how to justify the size of investment that could occur in the region, and how to prioritize and message the various projects throughout those 3 counties. The steering committee has met once. I attended the steering committee meeting, and the bulk of that meeting was spent on how are we going to, as the Key Peninsula and the West Sound, going to describe ourselves and the transportation investment that is needed. So for example, for comparison, Snohomish County has said that they need $1.1 billion in a $10 billion transportation package, because that's roughly 1%, and they generate roughly 1% of the state's GDP. They have roughly 1% of the state population. They have, there's a whole number of metrics that add up to that 1% number that make it very compelling, and is a strong justification on why the state would want to fund that amount of money for that region. So for our region now, the steering committee is looking at what are some of the data points and metric points that would justify an investment into the region, and what would that look like? So the steering committee is starting on their work. They're scheduled to meet again in September, and I'm going to continue to participate on their behalf. If you have thoughts on how you all would like to be represented in that process, I encourage you to email me with those or give me a call, so that we can have a good discussion and make sure that Port Orchard is being represented in those conversations. One of the questions that comes up is, it's great that you all are doing this work regionally. However, what if there is not going to be a transportation revenue package in 2015, and is this all just a waste of our time? And to that I say, good point, but let's be optimistic, and that it's very likely that Olympia will arrive on a transportation revenue package at some point. It may not be this year or even in 2016, but it may be in 2017. And the sooner the region starts to coordinate and better understand what the region's priorities are, the more successful we'll be at the time if and when a transportation revenue package does come about. So with that, I think there's some added detail in the document I provided with you, but I'd like to move on to the operating budget. Before I do so, I want to pause and see if there are any questions on transportation. Mayor Mathis.
Do we have a name? Is this West Sound Regional Consortium Partnership? What are we going to?
Yeah, the steering committee brainstormed names at their last meeting and developed the name West Sound Alliance. Okay. And so that will be a name that will be recommended from the steering committee back to the larger stakeholder group, and will be determined by the larger stakeholder
That'll
group.
be one of the first tests, won't it, to see? Okay, but good. So West Sound Alliance, straightforward. That's exactly what we hope it to be. And so good for you guys.
Questions?
Any other questions?
It's more of a comment than a question. I'm encouraged that there is this regional cohesiveness, and if successful, do you think there could be the same amount of success with something larger, like maybe a district of the ferry communities? I know they've tried in the past, but they don't seem to have gotten a lot of success. Within this region or statewide? Statewide.
I certainly think that's possible. I think it's a much harder task than a geographic region coming together. One of the things this group spent a lot of time talking about was that as the Key Peninsula, whether you're in Port Orchard or Gig Harbor, you are reliant on some sort of transportation infrastructure to get here. Meaning you're either reliant on the Tacoma Narrows Bridge or on a ferry, but you're reliant on some transportation infrastructure that helps your economy, that gets people to their jobs, that contributes to commute times, that is necessary in the case of some sort of a natural disaster or emergency. And that in and of itself binds the Key Peninsula region together as something that other regions don't experience.
Any other questions for the this segment. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so with that, I want to move on to the operating budget. I think, as you all know, the operating budget funds all of the state agencies, including the state's K through 12 education system. It also is the budget where all of the city's state shared revenues, meaning the accounts where the city gets a portion of the revenues the state collects, come from. What is going on in this budget definitely impacts not only all of those other state agencies, but impacts whether or not you as a city will continue to receive those shared revenues. For the 2015-17 operating budget, the state is expected to have $2.4 billion more than what they had in 2013-15. However, even with that additional increase, there is not enough revenue to cover expected caseload forecasts. In fact, it pushes the state into the red. An additional $700 to $800 million is needed to maintain current caseloads and programs. So before making any policy changes whatsoever, the state is starting out the 2015-17 budget $700 to $800 million in the red. In addition to that, the Supreme Court has said through the McCleary Supreme Court decision that an additional $1.2 to $2 billion will need to be invested in K through 12 education. This means that from the 2013-15 budget, there will need to be a $2 billion plus adjustment of either additional revenue or cuts in order to address the McCleary decision. So money will be tight, to put it bluntly and shortly and succinctly. What that means for Port Orchard is that in the 2013-15 budget, we got 50% of our historical levels of liquor tax revenues. And so we weren't even getting the full amount, and now they're going to need to make either revenue adjustments or cuts from there. Because of what we've seen in recent years, which is a steady decline in the amount of revenue that the state is allocating to the local level, AWC and a number of other lobbyists like myself who represent jurisdictions throughout the state have started to wonder if there's a different conversation we can have with the state. We've explained to them the importance of the revenue, and in many cases they agree that the revenue is important, but because of the demands on the state budget, they haven't been allocating the revenue to the local level, and that's of course impacting your budget and the budgets for cities throughout the state. So is there another conversation we can have with them about what they can do to assist cities in continuing to deliver services at the local level? Are there laws that can be changed, regulations that can be eased, cost savings that can be found? That conversation is just emerging. On Thursday, I'll be participating in a meeting with a number of different lobbyists. That's a brainstorm session of what that might look like. Some of the ideas that have emerged, and I'm not endorsing any of these, I'm just explaining that these are the ideas being discussed, would be removing the 1% cap on the property tax and instead replacing that with a growth inflator that cities could choose to utilize. They wouldn't necessarily have to, but that they could choose to. Another concept is instituting fiscal home rule, meaning that a city becomes completely self-reliant, so doesn't rely on any state revenues, but in return for that would have the ability to adjust their service levels, regulations, and tax revenue generators and completely independently and have a lot of freedom to do that. So these are some fairly large changes. One of the things that has been consistent throughout all of them is that there should be no mandate on any particular city to change anything, and that it should be optional. And I think that is key for cities to be able to choose how they want to govern and how reliant they want to be on the state. I did want to make sure you were aware of that conversation as it was going on and let it enlighten your discussion for your potential your future legislative agenda this next session, and be aware that there's some potential proposals out there. Are there any questions on the operating budget? Presented some doom and gloom and then maybe a little ray of hope.
Brianna, my question is, where does the marijuana taxes fit into the budget?
So, according to current law, marijuana tax receipts are allocated entirely to the state, and there is not a distribution to the local level. We advocated, along with a number of cities throughout the state, that those revenues should be shared with the local level because the impacts of the marijuana legalization are felt at the local level, and in particular felt by local law enforcement. We had a bill last legislative session that did that and would give the local level 12% of the revenues generated. That is relatively minimal compared to what we get with liquor revenues. With liquor revenues, we've historically gotten 50%. Even with that minimal amount of sharing, we have gotten, the bill did not pass, and we got significant opposition from state legislators, particularly those drafting the budget, that said, no, the state needs this money. The state needs it to fund McCleary.
And that was part of my question. That money goes into the operating budget.
Correct.
And do they have a feel yet for what those revenues may look like to offset the $2.5 billion they're going to be looking for?
Right. So I've seen early reports that say that thus far about $1 million in tax revenues have been collected, which hardly makes a dent in a $2 billion shortfall. However, they aren't releasing any official revenue projections, and we will see those revenue projections before the legislative session. So that's something we anticipate to have happen between now and January. And it could go up, it could go down. It's really anybody's best guess.
So that million was based on just 1 month?
Correct.
The month of July, okay.
Correct. So times 12. It's 12 million, which still may not make a significant dent in a $2 billion budget gap. But don't they only have a fraction of the retail centers open at this point in time? That's correct. And that's why I said it could go up or down. It's really, yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Oh, I don't see any other hands, so.
Okay, I have one more budget to brief you on, and it will be brief, and that's the capital budget. The capital budget, the size of the capital budget and the amount of revenue available in the capital budget is dependent on the size of the operating budget. So how the state chooses to resolve that $2 billion shortfall will then correspond with how big the capital budget is. But sort of a back of the napkin estimate, making some assumptions and guesses based on the political climate, puts the capital budget at about $1.8 billion, which means there will be a $1.8 billion investment in bricks and mortar projects throughout the state. That includes construction projects for schools, including community colleges and higher education, as well as K through 12 facilities to address class size issues. But there will also be an investment in local projects. This is the budget that the remainder of funding from DeKalb Pier would come from. Which is something you all have indicated numerous times you want to continue to work on. So I would want you to highlight that there is still some opportunities for funding through that budget. The other concept that's going on is a referendum effort to raise $3 to $6 billion to fund stormwater, water supply, and flood mitigation. And it's an emerging proposal and a revenue generator. A mechanism hasn't been identified yet, but it's been acknowledged that stormwater, water supply, and flood mitigation are 3 policy areas that consume a lot of funding within the capital budget, and that if they were separated out and given it their own independent revenue source, that it would free up a lot of money in the capital budget to either meet some of that $2 billion deficit in the operating budget or to fund more community projects. So that's another proposal that is floating out there. For the 2015 session as we see it now. Of course, we've got the November elections between now and session, so many things could change. And I wanted you all to get that briefing prior to us all having a discussion on the legislative agenda. And again, I've attached your current one to tonight's documentation, and I'm hoping that you'll look at it and offer some feedback on what you want to see in 2015 when I see you again.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Coming here, and we'll schedule another one, another update, maybe one more before the session starts. Okay, thank you. All right. We have another presentation. Executive Director, Mr. Powers, could you come up, please? He's Executive Director of, as we all know, KEDA, and will give us a quarterly report, I believe it is.
Thank you, Your Honor. It's a great opportunity to be in front of the council and the community to give you an update on the activities of the Kitsap Economic Development Alliance. Before I begin there and present some reports to you, I just want to comment on that being an excellent briefing from your lobbyist, laying out the big picture of the state budget in the three phases. That was remarkable work, and the Economic Development Alliance is pleased to participate with the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council and other bodies here in the West Sound to make sure that we do in fact have a cohesive, prioritized regional transportation strategy. I think if we do it that way, we will enhance the prospects for attaining the type of investment we need in this region. So I was pleased to hear that as well. With your permission, Your Honor, I'm just going to approach the bench or the council dais and give to each council member what has transmitted electronically to the city at the end of each quarter relative to the activities. So with your permission, I'll pass those out.
Please do. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I have the 6th page on yours, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Routinely, we have come before this body, as we do the other city councils in the county and the county commissioners and port districts on a quarterly basis to give you an update of 90-day activities. The last time I was in front of this council was in January, which was to present the fourth quarter of last year, kind of a year-end wrap-up on 2013.
Do you have a copy for our clerk? That way she can get it up on the...
I'm sorry. I don't. I apologize. I should have had an extra one.
Because I received one.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Electronically. So if you'd please put it up on the... Thank you.
And this report is for the second quarter, the time period of April 1st through June 30th of this year. So in any event, routinely over the last several years, we've been in front of our public partners, if you would, on a quarterly basis. The last time I was in front of the Port Orchard City Council was in January, where I presented basically the fourth quarter or year-end wrap-up on activities. For whatever reason, we got off that schedule this spring. It might have been a scheduling conflict or whatever. We're now here reporting on the second quarter, but I also have updates for year-to-date through June. I would recommend and advise to the council and the mayor that I think it is best, at least from our viewpoint, if we do appear here on a quarterly basis, because that keeps the rhythm of business reporting for us and we feel more current if we can do it that way. If we want to back off, then I would suggest that either our two board members from the Economic Development Alliance, the mayor and Councilmember Childs, come in and brief the council every other quarter on their activities because they come to the board meetings, or perhaps we meet with the Economic Development Committee on those off quarters. I mean, we're flexible. We want to do whatever best informs the council, but you just advise us as to what is best for you. One of the reasons we decided to come before councils like yours on a quarterly basis is we don't want to be here once a year asking for money. We don't want to be here at budget time saying, will you continue to fund us, if we haven't had an opportunity to basically brief you and keep you advised through the year. We think that's just good business. You're our shareholders, if you would, and investors, and we want to make sure that you know what's going on. So the document in front of you, as I referenced, is for the second quarter of this year. It's broken out on page 1 by business retention and expansion activities, which really is the heart of our activity, meeting with businesses already here, representing them in the marketplace, connecting them to new resources or relationships that might provide new opportunities in their business. It's basic 101. Take care of the businesses you already have here in your economy. The second component is business recruitment, and yes, we do spend time and activity responding to inquiries of businesses looking at this marketplace, as well as targeting businesses that we think would be a good fit, and then basically to present to them the Kitsap offering, whether it be in Port Orchard or whether it be an unincorporated Kitsap, wherever we feel the assets, the infrastructure, the workforce may be best presented to that company for opportunity. And then we go into our economic research reports and inquiries, community relations. We spend a lot of time in the community advising business leaders and community leaders of, like yourselves, of what's going on in the marketplace and your particular opportunity to work with us in supporting it. And then we work with policy initiatives. We just mentioned that on the transportation front. Infrastructure is critical, whether it be our ferry system, whether it be our highways, whether it be water and sewer, whether it be public transportation. It's important that our market is connected to this greater region, and goods and services and workforce can flow in and out of Kitsap County. If you look at the first quarter, you'll see that companies visited or presentations countywide, this is countywide, numbered 14 through the year, the first 2 quarters. That's on a target of 60 for the year, so we're ahead of our company or site visits this year. Relative to number of companies directly assisted, many of those in our Small Business Government Relations PTAC program. In the second quarter, again countywide, we've assisted 35. Year to date, through the first 2 quarters, 79, and that is on a target of 100. So we're doing well relative to our numbers and the number of companies that we seek to assist. If you look to page 2, you'll see the breakout by jurisdiction in the county. Bainbridge, Bremerton, Kitsap County, the unincorporated areas of Kitsap County, Port Orchard, and Paulsbo. And then you'll see by category the number of businesses within your jurisdiction assisted, or in this case, after PTAC, 9 businesses assisted in the Port Orchard community. In the first 2 quarters of this year, we have responded to inquiries or provided assistance to companies looking at coming to Kitsap, and in particular the Port Orchard and the Port Orchard Business Park, 14 some companies that we have provided information to. A couple of those are active open cases, which you will see highlighted down below by code name, business industry, and the current details of the cases. Through the first 2 quarters of this year, we have opened 6 recruitment or attraction files that pertain to your jurisdiction, the city of Port Orchard. There were 2 opened in the very first quarter, one on January 30th, one on February 25th, which doesn't appear in this report, and then 3 here that do appear, a June 16th file that was opened, a May 16th file, and an April 7th file. It describes the type of business that we are working with and the code name. Oftentimes when businesses are looking to move or expand, they want to do that in confidence, and we treat them as any other business professional or consultant would and hold their names, if you would, confidential. But as you know, Mayor and Councilmember Childs, coming to our board meetings on a regular 9-day basis, we go into a little more detail should the client allow us to discuss that. The other thing I would point out to you would be the number of recruitment activities that we have engaged in the first 2 quarters of this year, particularly around our initiative on aerospace and defense. As you all know, we are a defense-based economy here in Kitsap. That's nearly 50% of our economic output and employment base. And what we're wanting to do is to really leverage that advanced manufacturing industrial capacity here in this county to pivot a bit and have our existing companies start to produce products and services and machine products in particular for the industry. When we started this initiative just about 3 years ago, we had 1 company in Kitsap County in that space. Today we have 4. Now, although that might not seem like a lot, they employ nearly 200 people in this county today. And when you ask those employees how important the aerospace industry and manufacturing is to them. They'll be pleased to tell you very important. So we're getting some traction there. We're working it hard. We're going to every aerospace summit and trade show in our region, and we're also going to the largest trade show in the industry every other year between Paris, France, and Farnborough, England, and we just returned from the Farnborough Air Show, a delegation of myself, Kitsap County Commissioner Charlotte Garrido, and former Port of Bremerton CEO and the co-chair of our alliance, Tim Thompson. While there, we had 6 one-on-one meetings with defense contractors that are already here in our county. Now, you might say to yourself, so why would you meet with businesses in England that are already here? You meet with those businesses at a different level. When you meet with the Raytheons, the Lockheeds, the L3s, the Northrops, the United Technologies here locally, they're focused on their existing business. And we help support them, particularly on connecting them to subcontractors, smaller businesses, which are part of their contract requirements, and workforce. But when you meet with their senior leadership at a major air show and you lay out your case and describe for them how they're already succeeding in this market and introduce them to potential prospects for new programs that they could bring to this area, if they're going to look at the Seattle regional market for new defense aerospace programs or commercial aerospace programs, we want to make sure that they're looking at Kitsap as part of that opportunity. So we take the opportunity to lay that case out. In addition to courting those businesses already here, we met with an additional 22 aerospace companies that had expressed interest in expansion in the U.S., much of it driven by Boeing's expansion on the I-5 corridor, particularly around composites development, the 777X, the 737E. So Seattle and the Seattle market, of which we are a part, is probably the most robust and growing aerospace economy or sector in the globe. We want to try and leverage that. We want to try and have existing businesses start to build product in that supply chain. And we're also working hard to get businesses like Omohundro, that is located here in Port Orchard, to come and join those type of companies and reestablish or expand into this market and employ. Today, Omohundro, on its one-year anniversary from coming into this market, has an employment base of nearly 50. They're in full operation. They are providing those very sophisticated composite structures to their suppliers. Most of them are defense aerospace manufacturers. And we paid a visit on a couple of their clients while we were at the air show to make sure they knew that they're doing well here in Kitsap and kind of reintroduce the potential for additional businesses doing business with them as well. So aerospace remains a clear initiative of ours, but it's not the only thing we work on, for sure. We work in the technology area a lot. We work in the professional service and healthcare area. We work wherever there's an opportunity for us to attract investment and create basically family wage primary jobs. And we've had a busy second quarter doing that, both countywide and here in your jurisdiction. We expect the balance of the year to continue to be pretty brisk. The economy has recovered. You might have seen the news on the unemployment rate, which has dipped to a 7 or 8 year low at this point. It's about 5.1, 5.2. And that is significantly better than just 3 years ago when we were here in Kitsap, favored with only a 7.5%, 8% unemployment rate, where the nation was struggling with 10, 12 or more. So the economy is cautiously getting better. I know there's still a lot of challenges on the government side and with municipal and county budgets. You've lagged behind, but from everything I can see and read, including on sales tax, consumer, homes, et cetera, we've got a floor underneath us now, and I think we're building back. So we're looking forward to continuing to work with you to do everything we can to attract that investment and create jobs. I will say this, as we look to the balance of the year, there's a couple of things I'd like to advise the council of. In September, at our third quarter KEDA board meeting, the Economic Development Alliance board meeting, our business focus will be on aerospace and defense. And right after our board meeting at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and you'll receive written announcements of this, at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, we're going to focus on the Aerospace and Defense Alliance. We'll give our annual report. We will have a keynote address from Alex Peach, who is the director of the Washington State Office of Aerospace. And we will also be introducing companies here in our market that are operating in that space so they can tell their story about operating successfully here in Kitsap. So it'll be out at the Bremerton National Airport. It'll be at 3 p.m. in the afternoon on September 18th, and I invite you all to join us. The mayor and Councilmember Childs will already be with us for the KETA board meeting, which begins at 2 that afternoon, and looking forward to that. And then as we, pardon me, as we move into the fall, we will sponsor our second Decision Makers event. That'll be on October 23rd. It'll be up in Central Kitsap at the Silver Beach Hotel, and we will be focused on the changing face of healthcare and how that is developing and will significantly impact Central Kitsap and the Silverdale area. And that is on October 23rd. Invite you to join us that day as well. With that, happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Questions? A lot of information.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Mayor?
Thank you, John. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, that concludes our presentation part of the meeting. We do have a public hearing scheduled. Public hearing and adoption of resolution declaring water, sewer, utility, and storm drainage. Water, sewer, utility, and storm drainage equipment surplus. And we'll just give a minute or two for one of our council members to facilities out there, and then he'll be right back. And then we'll ask Mr. Martin to go ahead and give us an explanation of.
You'd like me to proceed, Mayor Mathis?
Can we wait just a minute or two? He said he would be right back, so.
Sure.
That way, everybody will hear the same. Okay, here we go. Okay, Mr. Martin, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor Mathis, members of the Port Orchard City Council, citizens. Assets of the city that are no longer usable, are no longer of value to the city, or are surplus to city needs may be removed from city ownership, sold, or in any other way disposed with a declaration of surplus by the City Council. RCW 35 requires a public hearing prior to disposal of equipment owned by a utility. Surplus water, sewer, utility, and storm drainage utility equipment is described on Attachment A. Surplus personal property is described on Attachment B. Money from the sale of surplus property is deposited into the fund which owned the equipment. When disposal is to the public through direct sale, sealed bid, or auction, final determination of value shall be the highest responsible bid or offer. The city may transfer a surplus asset to another public agency upon written request and the determination that it is in the best public interest to do so. The recommendation of staff is to open the public hearing.
Okay, I hereby open this public hearing. And is there anybody in the public wishing to make comments on? Please come up.
It's just that we don't know what's on that list, and for us to even be able to read it, why isn't it attached? You have something here to say that you're going to do it, and it says see Appendix A, but we never see what's going to be gotten rid of. So we don't know. And even standing here, I can't read that. Okay. There's a little button on a computer that enlarges print, and I don't see why it can't be on a little drive, and when it's put up there, at least we could see it because you would just highlight it and move it up in size. Nothing that we put up there is visible when we're out here in the audience. It was a waste of money to get those TV screens because everything is printed so small that it can't be seen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would it help to put the overhead down? It might be a little bit better.
It's just as printed too small. You can
Yeah.
enlarge it on a computer and maybe not see the whole thing, but go up and down and see it. It's ridiculous that you expect us to know what's up here.
Okay.
Well, I might add that, I can't speak to the small print, but I would entertain for you to say that the list contains old Motorola radio equipment that was made obsolete when the federal government changed the band. After 9/11, there was an issue of radios needing to correspond, and the country started on an effort to change the radio frequencies, and this equipment, for the most part, is obsolete equipment. So that's what's listed. Right. Right. No, thank you.
Point well taken, though. I guess what we need to do is print out larger, do like you said, print these out in a much larger format, and then scroll down on, and we'll work on that so that it will be more readable. Any time that we're getting rid of any
Jerry,
surplus
it
equipment.
is available online, and you could see it on my phone, but I can't even read it on my phone. Yeah. But maybe we could have tablets that you could see or something.
You just spend a lot of money for this equipment that isn't
Right.
I don't think it was designed to show text, actually. I think it's designed more for maps and for visuals.
Mr. Mayor, would it be helpful if we read the list for the public?
We could do that for tonight. I would be glad to say that, or to highlight the first page.
We could take turns each reading a line.
Well, I would just say everything on the first page, and it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12.
The staff
About
might
25.
suggest we can go make copies if that would mitigate
That's probably the most
situation.
efficient thing.
Right.
In the future is to provide copies with the agenda.
Nick's going to make a couple of copies, so we want to thank him for that.
I don't know if that microphone works. Let me see. So another option that may be that the council may or the mayor want to reconsider is staff used to provide packets to the public at no charge for a complete packet, and if there's certain items that warrant the level of having a full packet or portions of the packet beyond the resolution and ordinance to be provided to the citizens, I'd be happy to do that. Whether it's all the packets or certain information, maybe items that are being disposed, we can make sure that there's copies available for the public out on the desk outside. Just let me know what staff or what the council wishes staff to do.
How often do we do this? A couple times a year, disposing of property? I mean, when we're taking those type of actions, maybe we want to have a handful of copies laying around on the table outside. It's probably the most.
I think that would be a good idea if you would make a mental note and a physical note that when we have any kind of list like this, that it's actually considerably larger and printed out, and maybe a dozen copies of the list so we could have it out here. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I had a question in, I guess this is appropriate time. The public hearing is on declaring water, sewer, utility, and storm drainage equipment surplus, but the actual equipment list includes property from the police department, court, clerk's department, public works, parks department, engineering. So I was a little confused on
There's
of the public hearing.
There's a and a B. If you look up in the left-hand corner, it says attachment A.
Yes.
And then there's attachment B.
I'm referring to the agenda that speaks to this public hearing as posted was the adoption of a resolution declaring water, sewer, utility, and storm drainage equipment surplus, but this includes additional surplus beyond those departments.
That is true.
Okay.
But I took the liberty to combine it because the hearing is required for the utility, as the narrative pointed out, but the personal property of the others does not require a hearing, but still requires the council to accept it as surplus. So it's just a step to do two things in one document.
Thank you.
And the motion for consideration, when you get to it, addresses both categories, and the resolution addresses both categories.
For A and B, okay.
It was my effort to make it simple.
Okay. After the public gets an opportunity to look at the list, I will ask again if there's any additional public comments or questions. Thank you, Mr. Bond. Appreciate that. Okay, does anybody in the public have any questions for staff or the council on this list? Seeing none. All right. Is there any other comments in general about this, the surplusing of this equipment from the public? All right, seeing none, I hereby close the public hearing. Is there any additional comments from staff to the council at this time?
The staff would recommend consideration of the resolution declaring the property surplus.
Thank you. Council, what's your pleasure? Would you like to?
It's not listed in our business
No.
items.
No, because we do it all at once now.
Right.
Oh. Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I move to declare certain personal property surplus and authorize the disposition of surplus water, sewer, utility, and storm drainage utility equipment.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we
I'll
have
second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. We'll open the floor for discussion or comments.
I just have a question, Mr. Martin. Some of the items on here are small and probably have no value. There are others, such as the 2003 Dodge Intrepid and the 92 GMC van. Do we sell those at auction or anything, or do we just?
We do, and we follow the state requirements to do so. So yes, they are sold through that. That's correct.
Any money received goes to the department?
Goes to the fund in which the purchase was originally made.
Yes. So if it's a police vehicle, it'll go back into the police.
The police fund.
Okay. Any other questions? Then we'll go ahead and we'll be voting on adopting the equipment surplus list as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to business items, and we'll start off with business item A, approval of contract authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Asphalt Patch Systems and Company Incorporated. Mr. Dorsey, could you tell us about this, please?
Thank you, Your Honor, council members. On July 8, 2014, the City of Port Orchard Public Works Department issued a notice to bidders, invitation to bid to the Port Orchard Independent, and uploaded bid documents to the Builders Exchange of Washington for the city's 2014 roadway asphalt repair projects. By the July 22, 2014 noon deadline, 6 sealed bids were received. The asphalt patch system bid of $184,559 was determined to be the lowest responsible bid for all 5 work zones identified within the project, being Schedules A through E. Given budgetary constraints and current private development activity along Horseman Road, it is the Public Works Department recommendation that only zones 1, 2, 3, and 5, or Schedules A, C, D, and E, be completed now, and the work within Zone 2 be revisited in 2015. A summary of bids received is attached. The Public Works Department has confirmed that the public work advertisement process was followed and that the proposal can be funded within the street fund of the approved 2014 budget. Staff recommends that the City Council authorize the mayor to execute contract 065-14 with Asphalt Patch Systems Incorporated for Schedules A, C, D, and E only of the 2014 roadway asphalt repair projects in an amount not to exceed $131,016, with the contract term beginning August 12, 2014, and project completion within 90 working days.
Councilor, yes. Ms. Lucarelli.
I move to authorize the mayor to execute contract number 065-14 with Asphalt Patch System, Inc. for Schedules A, C, D, and E only of the 214 roadway asphalt repair projects in an amount not to exceed $131,016.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Do we have something that tells us what A, C, D, E, F, G is?
Just the attachments. The attachments, A, B, C,
If you look in the, there's a schedule of values.
See the Schedule A, and it talks about
so
minor changes, final cleanup.
Right, so you have a work zone. The city follows our emergency management mapping for the different zones, which isn't included. That's just, we did this last year. It's the same thing we did last year.
And I didn't understand it last year.
I have the map here if anybody wants to see it.
I mean, the bid package was 3 inches thick, so I didn't see that we would print that. So we go out, we take photographs of every area that needs to be repaired. They're basically water, sewer repairs, cold patches, potholes. We photograph them, we mark the limits, we take a picture with a designation 3-16, for example. So 3-16 is in Zone 3, and it's number 16. And so each zone, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, these quantities are the total for that zone. I mean, in lieu of having a engineering and surveying department and spending money on, or hiring a consultant to do this, this is the only cost-effective way to get a bid out.
I'm only suggesting as a piece of information, we just take a map and draw a line and say, this is the street that's in Schedule A.
We couldn't do that.
Can't do that?
No. The map that we've got is the citywide map. If we tried to map every one of these locations, there's literally 300 of these citywide. They're just small.
We're going to pave 300 locations in the city?
Yeah, they're just, John, this isn't our like overlay projects. These are out here on Division and Sydney, that water valve that sunk, and we put cold patch in it.
Okay.
So for us to go through the city and try to identify every one of those on the map would be impossible.
Monsters, okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions for staff? All right, then. We're going to be voting on approval of contract authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Asphalt Patch Systems and Company not to exceed $131,016. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. That motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we're at approval of the July 22nd council meeting minutes. What's your pleasure?
I move approval of the July 22nd council meeting minutes.
You?
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Is there any other discussion?
I'm going to be abstaining since I wasn't in attendance.
Okay.
Just a grammatical situation on page 6, in the 4th paragraph down. City attorney said this action, it should be, the word should be is, not in.
Okay. Grammatical correction on page 6, paragraph 4. Anything else?
That's a typo.
All right. We're going to be approving the council meetings as corrected. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion passes. Thank you.
And one abstention.
And one abstention, sorry. Mr. Clausen abstained. We're at 7C, discussion Bay Street pedestrian path alternatives and right-of-way service precursor summary of findings. Mr. Dorsey, could you lead us into that, please?
Thank you, Mayor. On February 11th, 2014, the Port Orchard City Council authorized the execution of Contract 02814, thereby authorizing Universal Field Services to assist in the decision-making process associated with the Bay Street pedestrian pathway project and the 5 existing overwater structures located along Bay Street. The primary focus for Universal Field Services was to obtain title reports, prepare appraisals, meet with property owners, summarize their findings as to overall acquisition costs anticipated, and determine the level of participation interest of the homeowners. The discussion regarding the Universal Field Services findings for the precursor activities are to occur at executive session. The remaining decision-making alternatives for public discussion this evening are as follows. Alternative 1. Alternative 1 is to terminate the federalized project at Segment 5, being West Bay Center. This would require the repayment of the $300,000 and to de-obligate current funding, about $2.2 million in current funding. Alternative 2, Bay Street one-way option. This would require the reclassification of Perry Avenue to a 6,000 average daily tripped minor arterial. Alternative 3, construct deviated pathway within the existing right-of-way as it's currently designed. This would require Washington Department of Transportation approval of the deviation from the 14-foot required minimum pathway width down to a 10-foot, and based on conversation with the Department of Transportation, would basically direct the city to utilize the city's existing right-of-way and not provide any additional parking. Alternative 4, construct a non-deviated pathway. By constructing a 14-foot wide pathway, that would require the removal of the 5 overwater structures. So the city initially, in 2005, submitted for a federal grant to build a waterfront pathway from ferry terminal to ferry terminal. The project prospectus is very specific that it was a mosquito fleet trail project to be built along the water. As the project basically sat dormant from 2005 to 2008, when the project design commenced, the city moved forward with working within the constraints of the pathway. And again, the federal constraints is where it can actually go to be federally compliant. and proposed deviations were necessary under the direction of the highway local programs, basically stating you'll have to design it as a multimodal pathway project, but we cannot guarantee if the deviations will be approved. And so based on having gone through the shoreline process, gone through all the approvals and reviews, we're basically at the juncture today where I can say you really only have two viable options. One is to terminate the project or to take the homes. To make Perry Avenue a one-way minor arterial, it would have to meet the highway local programs, local agency guidelines for a minor arterial for 6,000 cars per day. Based on conversation with transportation, that isn't viable. And to pursue the deviated plan and put the pathway within the existing right-of-way is also not viable. So you're either going to terminate the project or take the homes. And the other key piece is, now that we've worked further down on the environmental piece, it will take the removal of the homes in order to permit, to get the additional ecological lift to permit that segment 6 and 7. So that's really, in a nutshell, that's really the decision. That's the two really viable options to discuss this evening, in my opinion, are alternates 1 and 4.
Mr. Mayor?
Right, yes.
I just feel compelled to let the public know that the City Council, the members of the City Council, have not seen the report from Universal Field Services. There has been no decision made. We have not seen the report. We do not know what is in the report.
That's, I believe we're having an executive session later this evening.
It's entirely up to the council.
Well, this suggests
have an executive session or not. Mr. Chang?
This suggests that the findings are separate from the appraisal. Is that the case, or is it all one big package?
No, remember at the work study session where we had our do's and don'ts for executive session, I think it was very clear that real estate matters, discussing values, discussing who says yes, who says no, those are executive session discussions. The discussion of the alternatives, and that's why we put it on the agenda tonight as an open discussion, because I know there's been some concern that this is the decision's made, and this is to assure the public this decision has not been made by any stretch of the imagination. This was the project that started as a federal project. When we hired Universal in 2013 to do the federal acquisitions, we put them on hold immediately. When we looked at the potential of taking the homes, we then in February hired Universal to do what we called the precursor work, which is the non-federal funding, to basically go through a federal process to look at all the viable alternatives. And through this process, there are 4 viable alternatives. And having moved further over this last 6 months, we're now down to, there are really only 2 viable alternatives given responses that we've received back from the Corps of Engineers, Coast Guard, Corps of Engineers, DOT. Department of Natural DNR, DOT. We've been actively pursuing these alternatives to give the council the best information to make a decision. And so now it was discussed and decided at a staff and administrative level that this would be a public discussion, whereas the previous conversation about the alternatives were an executive session. And so again, the decision was to have the alternative discussion as a public discussion, but the actual values and who might sell, who might not, that's an executive session conversation.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, first off, if you're asking me to select an alternative, I need to hear the discussion about who's interested in selling and for how much. I think that's a key piece of information, at least for me, before I can pick one or the other. But the second question, and there were comments made here earlier this evening about, the price. And I'm familiar with the process that governments go through the condemnation, and I'm not as familiar with the process in simply a purchase. I know in a condemnation that if the property owner disagrees with the appraisal, they have the option to get a second appraisal, and you go through to try to find, what is the fair value of the property as best you can, and ultimately, if you can't agree on a number, then the judge decides what's the fair price. Is that similar if it's just like a purchase? I mean, it was brought up here tonight that some of the comparables that were used were not true comparables or whatever. I'm not an appraiser, but if you could share with us the process.
Yeah, so I'd answer it this way. If a property owner is willing to enter into a negotiation with the city to sell his or her property, then certainly the city is going to want an appraisal to make sure they know, that the city knows what the value is, and then can sit down and negotiate, just an arm's length negotiation and reach an agreement. There's no condemnation, there's no eminent domain claim, nothing. It's just a straight, are you willing to sell? Are you willing to buy? So that's one scenario. If a property owner is not willing to sell, and the city has passed a resolution, and the city decides that there's a public necessity here, a use for the benefit of the public, and they wish to condemn, I mean, you would do this formally with a formal vote. You would vote to condemn, and then we enter into the more formal process with an appraisal. They can offer an appraisal. If we can't agree, we go to court, and there are two issues. Is the city really acting with a public use in mind? And second, what is the fair value of the property? And a judge decides that. But even in the formal condemnation process, the parties can try and negotiate a resolution, and it's only if they can't agree that you go to a judge.
But there's also a specific process that we have to follow because there's federal money involved in this project. We can't just go, I mean, there's relocation assistance and a number of other things that are available to
that's
property owners.
Yes, to the extent your question, and I should have realized that, is specific to Bay Street. Yes, there is federal money, so we are going to have to follow the federal process.
Right, if we get there. So remember, Councilman Clausen, that this is a federalized project, and we started the federal acquisition process without the removal of the homes initially. The summary that we'll discuss at executive session of the appraisal piece has followed the federal process, but it wasn't a federally funded process. Mm-hmm. So officially, the federalized Bay Street pedestrian pathway, there has been no official negotiations, there's been no official offers. Good. This is simply a city-funded effort to reach out to the community, to the citizens, to do appraisals following their criteria, and the values that we'll discuss hopefully at executive session include appraised values using the federal process. It includes relocation assistance and those other pieces. So if the council chooses this evening after this open discussion and possibly an executive session to move ahead with alternative 4, for example, then the universal field services will be taken off hold, and they will move forward under the federal guidelines completely as far as meeting, negotiating, just like we did with Tremont. But at this point, the federal project has been on hold since basically like December of 2013, I believe.
But the fact is that we're going to move forward. If we are going to move forward, we have to follow the federal process because we're going to use federal dollars to do it.
Yes.
And then the report.
All of the requirements and restrictions and whatever else comes with the federal requirement is
mandatory.
They're mandatory, available to the property owners.
Right.
if we elect that we feel, we agree with this young lady that the comp wasn't used, we can elect to say, go back and reappraise this one.
Within, right, I mean, remember, and I just have to use Tremont as a recent example, there's certain negotiations and information provided. So let's say, for example, if Mrs. Ocean said, you know, these values are too low and I have my appraisal and these are what I came up with. I think that occurred in
Right.
about 12 of the...
In Tremont, yeah.
And
So there's a
whereas-
negotiation.
Right, whereas other people just said, yeah, we accept this. So there's the ability to have an appraisal done, there's a negotiation process, now there's statutory limits on relocation assistance and things of that nature. And again, the report from Universal, the precursor report, summarizes those, I'll say they're soft costs, incidental costs.
Thank you.
Mr. Cartwright,
Thank you. I'm trying to figure out at what point in time the removal of the homes became an option. I'm not sure I understood the timeline as far as when the project actually started. In '08, I think you said, '05 to '08, it was dormant. Were those homes part of the initial design or federal funding at that point in time? Or, you know, I'm trying to get a sense of how long in this process, I guess it goes back to '05, certainly way before my time here, but how long in that process the homes have been on, if you will, on the table as one of the options?
I would say from 2005 to 2008, the project was dormant. From 2008 to 2013, through the design process, the review of alternatives, it was always the city's intention to build the pathway, you know, within the right-of-way and not disturb the homes. The issue of taking the homes or not came towards the end of, you know, as we were moving forward with final design to actually get funding to, you know, to build phase 2, because phase 1 was up to West Bay. The highway local programs basically said, when we submitted the plans for DOT review, they said, you can't provide parking on the other side of the street, there's a liability issue, and they said, use your right-of-way. Just use your right-of-way. Well, that's when I came to the city, and I think it was an executive session that said, you know, if you just use the right-of-way, you're going to build a pathway up to the doorknobs of these homes, and their parking is going to be displaced, there's going to be no place to park, there's going to be no impetus or obligation for the city to replace that parking. We need to rethink this. And then as at the end of 13, when we were looking at that piece, a decision was made to look at the taking of the homes for both the, you know, ecologic lift, as it were, to ensure getting the permits for the, you know, the amount of overwater shading that would occur versus how much credit we're going to get for segment 1, which is between the downtown terminal and the park. We are getting ecological lift for that segment. And as we went through the public process, through the hearing examiner, it was self-mitigating at that time through that piece. In subsequent conversations over the years, because it's been years, 6 years, with the agencies, they're looking for more ecologic lift. And so we hit this time in 2013 where, you know, between the Department of Transportation and FHWA saying, you know, just build it up to the doorknobs, and the city council reacting to that is, that's not really, you know, a good situation for the homeowners. We looked at, okay, at least they'd be compensated at, you know, and have relocation assistance and those other things as an option to study. And that's where we're at tonight, is where we've really just come to this culmination of, you know, which way do we go?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I have,
Ms. Ashby.
I have 4 questions that are directed to staff, and they encompass, anyway, alternative number 1 requires a payback of about $300,000. And my question is, do we know how and when that has to be paid back? And it also says we have a deobligation of new funding. And my question is, when do we deobligate that? Does that have to be done immediately? I know that the funds that we have received through the KRCC process, that those funds are good from 2015 to 2017. So do we have to deobligate that immediately, or can we hold that out? My next question continues with funding. And I know that we have funds right now committed that we can use for acquisition of the properties. Can you tell me if we have funding sources to complete construction and what those funding sources would look like? And then my other question, I think, is probably directed more to Mr. Bond. And these homes, I know all are impacted by the Shoreline Master Plan. I know that they are all grandfathered in, but I would like to hear some dialogue on how they're impacted in the future by the Shoreline Master Plan, because they are all over water. If anything needs to be done to those homes, will they have to mitigate?
Okay, so to answer your question one, the repayment, the city would budget that for 2015. For the deobligation of the existing funding, I would basically notify PSRC and KRCC that we would deobligate the 425,000-ish that we received in 2012, 2013, and deobligate the 1.5 million that we received in the 2015-17. So I would say this fall we would have to deobligate that so that there would be the ability for KRCC, agencies within KRCC, to potentially receive that money rather than it going back to PSRC.
But can I just ask a question with that? If there's a situation, and again, for the public, we have not seen the report. We do not know how many homeowners are anxious to sell or not willing to sell. So I guess one of the things that's going through my mind is if there's homeowners right now who are unwilling to sell, in 2 years may change their mind. Can we hang on to that obligation for 2 years?
I wouldn't recommend that. I mean, I think it would be prudent to make a decision and move on, as opposed to continuing to pursue federal construction funds, state construction funds. The reason we put Universal Field Services on hold in 2013 was simply to not spend money that we ultimately would have to pay back. So to answer your last question, the city has not, this is a federal project, and even though we've built 3 segments, well, we've built segment 2 and segment 5, and we're currently funded to build segment 4, which is the bridge. Remember, that was using city and state funding. So technically, we've been constructing segments of a federalized project with non-federal money, which is perfectly legal. But until we have our right-of-way certification through a federal process, we're unable to obtain any federal funding. So I know in this Gordon Thomas Honeywell packet, we've been pursuing the $3.46 million through the transportation package, which is state funding. If we were to get that, we would basically say, and we killed the project, then we could use some of it to finish phase 1, segments 1 and 3, which is from Marley to Blackjack Creek. But we wouldn't be able to take a federal dollar till we have our right-of-way certified. Everything else we basically are complete on. We have our NEPA, our National Environmental Policy Act compliance. We have our shoreline. I think I've got that list if you want to hear it again. I read it out a couple months ago. So until we get the certification, we can't even apply for the federal money. The federal money we received initially was design money and then right-of-way money. To go into the construction funding, we have to get through the certification process. So there is no guarantee that we'll receive construction funding. I can say that given the work that the city has accomplished already and the nature of funding, multimodal funding is a lot easier to obtain than some other projects.
Mr. Patonsu.
Just a second, Nick
I
has
think
to-
she had a question for me as well.
Yeah, Nick had a...
So in terms of the Shoreline Master Program and the impact on the Shoreline Management Act on these existing structures, maintenance and repair of existing structures is exempt from having to get new shoreline permits. Expansion of these uses is subject to permitting requirements and potentially mitigation, but that has to be determined through hearings and other processes. And the other caveat is that I believe these would be considered non-conforming uses, though I haven't looked into it in great detail. And I think that our code requires those uses to be maintained. And if the use lapses for 18 months, it ceases to have its status as a legal non-conforming use. Right. So if the house was ever abandoned and not occupied, it could become an illegal structure.
Okay, Mr. Patonsu, you had a question.
For my mind, like Mr. Clausen, I'm going to need that executive session information, and everybody else is probably thinking that too. I mean, obviously, we're going to need that information. Probably going to need some time to digest that, and I don't know if that executive session is tonight or if it's at a future meeting. But even if we have that executive session tonight, I'm not ready to make a decision one way or the other at this point. My one question for Mr. Dorsey is, I know when we acquired some of the properties on Tremont, I mean, realistically, even if we decided option 4, we are looking at a few years, maybe many years before we're actually building this pathway, because we're going to either get a large chunk of funding or we're going to continue to, cobble funding together and build small segments. I, for one, want to see segment 1 completed before I would ever want to enter into, starting on segment 2. It doesn't make sense to have these little pieces everywhere that don't connect to anything. If we were to pursue option 4, could we not do lease options like we did on Tremont, where the property owners continue to live in the home until we're ready to build?
There are some multiple questions in there. So for starters, remember that we built segment 2 and 5 because of two things. One is the port was building their project. The port came to the city and said, hey, it doesn't make sense to tear up our park. We were able to get state funding through Derek Kilmer, and I think it was a capital budget or a legislative action. And there was enough funding there to do both segment 2 and segment 5 because Bob Hampton, who owned West Bay, was willing to donate an easement. So we built segments 2 and 5 for that reason.
And I get that. My question really is about, if we do pursue option 4, is there an option to do lease options like we did on Tremont, where the property owners lease the property back?
If we pursue segment alternative 4,
what was
which
the
is
term that we used, in particular the Coppola property? It was a condition. What was the
possession and use?
Possession and use. Thank you.
No, the city would have the ability, if the city pursued the non-deviated pathway and removed the 5 homes, and all 5 said yes, or 4 of the 5 said yes, and however we'd go through that option, each homeowner would have the ability through possession and use for the city to possess the building, but like in the Coppola Wet Apple scenario, he leased that building from the city. Mm-hmm. And he could have continued to lease that building. He chose to move out. It could be 5 or 10 years before we would actually get the funding and build the project. Now, we have our federal nexus of when we're supposed to complete the project, so I would be, very clear with FHWA and PSRC and those agencies that are in Department of Transportation local programs to make sure that we're pursuing funding, because we wouldn't want to get commit and obligate and expend this 2.2 million additional dollars, and then on top of the 300,000, so suddenly our clock runs out, we don't have the funding, and we got to pay back 2.5 million. I wouldn't, as your public works director, I'd say that's really fairly risky.
But as long as we're continually progressing, even if it's a segment at a time, that's progress, correct? And
We had 10 years, so we had until 2015 initially to complete the project. With right-of-way acquisitions, we gain another 10 years, but every 2 years we have to show progress.
Okay.
So really, we're looking at 2017 and then 2019, and so
every 2 years we have to show progress, and it continues to push us at 10 years
so we
out.
we could build segment 1, and we could do segment 3. So that gets us into 2000. But by 2021, we would be needing to build phase 2, which is from West Bay north.
But I think it would be important, though, that if we were to pursue alternative 4 and buy these and lease them back, that the folks that are there would need to understand that there's no guarantee on the length. It could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, it could be 2.
Could be 6 months, and that's what the possession.
As Mr. Dorsey said, the availability of non-motorized funds are much easier to get than money for Tremont, for example. So if we were successful in an application, we have to move. So I think we just need to be upfront if that was an option.
Mr. Chang wanted to ask a question.
Well, I just had 2 questions, and the first was, I'm not sure that Councilmember Cartwright's question was answered if he wanted a specific time, but I can tell you that it happened in 2012 or 2013, most likely before you and Councilmember Ashby were on the council. I do remember an executive session. The only person who remembers the dates is probably the attorney, because he keeps copious notes.
I do recall a conversation in 13 when I was a council member. I just was trying to figure out if it was the first conversation.
I believe it was the second.
On this particular
Yeah, I think
issue.
the first one was when you were not there. I'm not even sure if Cindy was at that meeting.
Wasn't.
I don't remember. So that may be part of the unfamiliarity that you have with the time frame. My second thing, and we don't have to discuss this tonight, it may be a conversation that I just follow up with Mark separately, is I'm not convinced that alternative 3 is completely off the table as you suggest.
I can address that.
Well, you also you have a much better memory than I do, and I apologize for that, but you're more intimately familiar with the details, the dates and the times, and the agencies. And so when you tell me that I should remember something that happened 2 months ago, I may not, because
Now, I think
3,
I could very briefly.
I can't remember what I had for breakfast, so.
Oh, thank you.
I think I can very succinctly. I can talk about both alternative 2 and 3, but for alternative 3, the original 2005 plan was to build a pedestrian pathway, because it was called the Mosquito Fleet Trail Pathway. And then in 2008, the federal government and the Department of Transportation had developed a multimodal pathway standard. And in that standard, it required a 14-foot wide pathway. So if you go down to West Bay Center, that is what is required to be built. And if you remember during the alternatives analysis, we talked about where is the bridge crossing going to be at. Are we going to go through the port? Are we going to go in front of Penn Feed? And we had these different alternatives. Norm Olson gave a presentation, and we had all these different alternatives that we looked at. And I've got that PowerPoint that I could provide to you. But the council looked at different alternatives, and one of the decision points that we had back then, which was probably 2011 would be my guess, was with the local programs basically saying this needs to be a multimodal pathway plan as opposed to a pedestrian path, so bikes included. The decision was made at that time to pursue the project, but with deviations. But local programs stated that we can't guarantee that you'll get funding if you have deviations, or that the deviations will be approved. But at that moment in time, we really had no options because of the the homes along the waterfront are built right on the property line. There's actually some encroachments. There was a vacation of 25 feet back in 1985 or so, but that basically just, half the house was in the right-of-way at that time. That vacation just moved it basically to the doorknob. And so Murphy's Law as it is, that particular stretch where you've got the steep bank, some structures, the ditch, the houses. I mean, Murphy's Law says in the one area that is our most constrained is right where we have these overwater homes. And that was, a decision was made back in 11, I believe, 11 or 12, where we would attempt to deviate from 14 feet to 10 feet to get through that narrow stretch. And so now that we're into 2014, conversations with local programs last year basically said the deviations aren't going to be approved, and the direction to the Public Works Department was, because we submitted the plans for them for review. Now, they haven't approved them yet, but we submitted them. One of their comments back was, use your right-of-way, don't use the deviations, don't provide parking. And that's really what spurred the Public Works Department coming back to council and saying, look, time out, things have changed, and you know, it's too narrow through here, we're going to have to look at different options.
I have a question on alternate 3. So you're saying that that is, to do that, to follow that deviated pathway, we'd have to pay the $300,000 back, or not? I mean, it sounds to me like the $300,000, that is what the original plan was.
The original $300,000 was to design the
But isn't
original
this
project.
the design of the original? So, I mean, we wouldn't have to pay the $300,000 if we deviated or tried to.
No, if we were to construct the deviated pathway, if the Department of Transportation approved it.
Right.
2 things would happen. 3 things. One is our scoring for federal funding would drop tremendously with the deviations. The residents of those homes would have no place to park because the pathway would be right up to their doorknob. And again, the state wouldn't fund or support mid-block crossings or the parking.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is up to interpretation and guessing, but in the city of Bremerton, the state has really bent over backwards traffic calming, you know, which would be similar to this, you know, and they do all kinds of traffic calming. They take 3-lane, 4-lane roads and convert them into one-way streets and things.
Well, I guess that's alternative 2.
Well, what I'm saying though is, I'm saying that we shouldn't throw out the number 3, because we don't know for sure that WRSTOT would approve the deviations, for sure, because we never set forth a plan.
Well, I'm saying that based on my conversations with local program, number 3 is not viable. When we submitted the plans to Department of Transportation, local programs called and said, we're not going to support the deviations. But again, the issue with the deviations is it's one thing to deviate it, but the other thing, which was discussed with council, was even with the deviation, that was going to put the pathway at the doorknob.
So the federal government approved the path, and the state's saying they don't like that idea.
No, the plans haven't been approved yet. They've been prepared and submitted.
Okay, I got you. Okay.
So Mark, I've got so many notes here, I don't even know where to go, but let me start with what the mayor's talking about. The pathway, I thought initially, the overall project had to be designed and approved for us to start on any segment at all. So that's not true, is that right?
No, because remember, we built those segments with non-federal money. We built segment 2 and 5 with.
We didn't have to have approval from Ecology or any of those guys.
No, we had our shoreline approval,
Okay.
and we had all of our. We went through a public hearing. We had our substantial shoreline development permit, and for segments 2, which were upland, working with the port. Now the port had their hydraulic project approval through Fish and Wildlife to remove that house and have the observatory. So segment 2, there were no permits required other than our SDAP to build segment 2. Segment 5, we had an HPA through Fish and Wildlife to build the pathway adjacent to the ordinary high water mark. But again, there was no core
So
jurisdictional.
there's no federal approval, but there was ecology and the water part of it was kind of.
The question you're trying to get here is, overall, we're trying to get federal approval and federal funding.
Right.
Where the segments we approved, we got with state money.
Right.
And we funded
But
with
with
state.
one
We didn't have
caveat.
to have the federal approval yet.
Okay, that's
With
great.
one
but-
caveat, as we did with our shoreline permit, we also have our NEPA, which is our overall blanketing environmental approval, our ECS, which is the federal environmental clearance for Section 106, you know, that whole thing.
Under the Endangered Species
Under the
Act.
endangered species. So we had all those approvals on the federal level. We wouldn't have moved ahead with segments 2 and 5 if we hadn't already had our shoreline permit and our NEPA done, and our ECS. And then, of course, our cultural resources review, which is part of Section 106. You know, we do have all of that. What we don't have, because we just submitted and then stopped the project, was the approval of the plans as they were designed from the Department of Transportation, local programs, because it was a deviated plan.
Now, the segment 2, there's deviations in that segment, right?
Segment 2, there are no
Park, I mean,
deviations.
the trail coming up out of the park, it doesn't seem like it's 14 feet and.
Oh, it's 14 feet.
Oh, it is 14 feet?
It's 10 feet of paved surface and two 2-foot shoulders for recovery. So,
Okay.
yeah,
And-
there's
and
no
as-
deviations on segment 2 or 5.
And as far as the arches these trails are supposed to have, they're not supposed to turn too sharp, and if they turn too sharp, then that's a deviation, isn't it? or
Right,
no?
that's all compliant.
That's all what?
Yeah, segments 2 and 5 are completely WashDOT multimodal pathway compliant.
Oh, they're.
And that's how they were
the
able
feds
to.
would, say that, well, that's great, you did great there.
No,
They wouldn't have
when
a problem with that.
When we built segments 2 and 5, local programs approved those two segments singularly. They never approved the overall project. They allowed us, because we had city funds and state funds, they approved segment 2 as a standalone and segment 5.
being who?
Highway local programs. They reviewed those plans.
Okay.
But they've never approved theoretically the entire Mosquito Fleet Trail.
Okay.
But those segments that they approved were in compliance.
Yes.
No deviations.
No deviation.
No deviations, and at the end of the project, local programs came out and did their audit, and that's why we ended up with that fence over by the Marley and that guardrail, was
Okay.
through that end of project. They approved it with just an 18-inch gore stripe, and when they came out, they said, we want a different barrier.
At some point, we thought we could possibly go through and do the alternative 3, and then with taking the right-of-way, which is actually public right-of-way, it's not like individual right-of-way, it's the people's right-of-way, and building this. And where I was going with this, I actually thought that the homeowners would be better off, because their property would never be worth more than before that trail went through. Because once the trail goes through and it runs up by the door, who wants that? So it made sense that maybe they would want to sell, because we wouldn't have to take their house and we would just go through there. So now I don't know what to think about that.
Well, I think that thinking is sound. I mean, if I lived there, I wouldn't, one is I would have no place to park, and 2, I'd have people looking in my window. So I don't think having a pathway up to the doorknob is beneficial to anybody.
So anyway, that's why, to me, segment 3 is somewhat important, because if we can't do segment 3 at all, then that rationale is gone, and so I don't know what it means. But I would say to the public that discussions, I mean, I've heard people talking tonight. To me, discussions aren't decisions. They're just discussions. It's no different than the public coming up and discussing. We're all discussing. No decisions have been made. And so we're trying to figure out the best way to go about it. And the same with, I think, with alternative 4. For me, alternative 4 doesn't mean condemnation. It just means that if you want to do alternative 4, those houses would have to, in some way, be gone, obviously, but maybe it's through a negotiation. Doesn't mean condemnation. So for me to look at alternative 4 doesn't mean a condemnation. It just means we're going to have a discussion with property owners, talk about the future, talk about what the property's worth, and, you know, do the things that, you know, you and I have even talked about, the idea that property owners might be able to get their money, get relocation money, possibly stay in the house for another 2, 4, 5, 6 years. I don't know what it would be. You know, there's advantages. I mean, everybody has to look into it, so I don't know how that would work out. But then the other thought I had was, well, maybe we run the trail out till we get to that area. And I don't know which house is the first house. I don't know if that's Randy's house or your houses, or I don't know which house it is. But if that person was willing to sell, maybe we could make a terminus and stop the trail right there. So the trail runs out, you can turn around and come back. No, can't do that.
This is the same issue we have with Tremont, in that when you apply for a federal project, you have what's known as a project prospectus. And that prospectus says the city will receive federal fundings to build a project from A to B. Okay. And that's what you do. And so we're kind of at this threshold of, we either need to build the project from A to B, which is a 1-mile waterfront pathway from ferry terminal to ferry terminal, or terminate the project, because any dollar, any federal dollar that we put into this project, if we don't build the pathway from the transit terminal to the Annapolis dock, we'll owe every one of those dollars back.
Every one of what dollars?
Every dollar that we expend. Design, right-of-way, construction. So there's no reason to obligate and expend more federal dollars, because you're just going to end up paying it back. So we're really at this is, you know.
So roughly how much would we have to pay back?
Right now, we would owe $300,000. If we went through the right-of-way acquisition phase and we terminated, we'd owe back $2.5 million if we didn't get funding. So we have about 2.2 in right-of-way funding right now that we haven't expended, but we've obligated. We've only got $300,000 currently expended, and that's all we owe. But if we were to use, well, and I guess the other piece is, we wouldn't be able to even get federal money to build the pathway from West Bay up to, I think it's Mr. Haynes, with federal money, because we can't get federal money until we have right-of-way certification for the entire project.
So it would jeopardize segment 1 if we didn't pursue from a federal standpoint.
Well, from a, yeah, I mean, if we terminate the project, we can build segment 1
with our own money.
With our own money. We can do segment 3 with our own money. You know, we'd probably work with the port.
Or state money too?
And state, yeah, state money.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, segment 1, the majority of that boardwalk is with one that's usable today. It's just not ADA compliant. That would probably be a joint project with the port, because the port basically owns or has a DNR lease for that entire area, so that would be a joint project. Segment 2 is done. Segment 3 is really our big remaining piece. The Comfort Inn is actually compelled to provide us access due to their shoreline permit, so we're really dealing with Bay Ford and getting around that corner. Segment 4 is, you know, nearing approval. So we're really talking about segment 1 and 3 if we wanted to terminate the project at the end of phase 1, which is West Bay.
Well, I'm not through. It's, I would say to the public, it's kind of a sticky wicket, because, you know, people aren't, a lot of people don't know it, but, you know, this has been going on for a long time, that people have wanted this trail. It's been going on for every plan that's ever, anybody can ever dig up, probably 50 years. And so we're at a point where, you know, we've actually got a stake in the ground now. We build segments. People are excited about the downtown. They're excited about seeing the trail go through. I'm not excited to be in this negotiation with these 5 houses, but every other part of it I'm excited about. And so, I mean, it has got so confusing since we've started this, because I thought alternative 3 was always possible. That, yeah, I think I agree with everybody that we can look at, have an executive session, maybe not tonight, because I think we're going to run out of time, but the next meeting, and then digest it and come out here and be as honest as we can with everybody. I know there's a lot of misinformation, but this council doesn't know a whole lot more, and we've never made any decisions on this, so that's all I would say.
Mr. Cartwright, you...
Yeah, I had a quick question, Mark. If we were to do alternative 1 and repay the 300 and de-obligate, I think you said 2.2.
Well, yeah, with alternative one, we would pay back 300,000 and we would just de-obligate the money we haven't spent.
Which
and
is
that
two,
would-
which is 2.2. Okay. So would we be able to reuse the 2.2 towards Tremont?
No.
No. Okay. I needed to ask. I didn't know the answer, but I'm glad I asked it because somebody
Mark,
else may.
Mr. Cartwright, just to explain a little bit, when, it's my understanding, when the KRCC divvies up the federal money that we're given, they kind of put so much to multimodal, so much to preservation, so much to rural. And so the amount, that this award that we were given this last, for 2015 to 2017, was specifically multimodal.
Yeah, I think they had some additional funding in the STP, and this qualified for surface transportation. So
Right.
it was a blend, but at the end of the day, there's two things that go against you. One is that it goes back into KRCC to get redistributed amongst the members, and two, remember that the requirement now is that you have a fully funded project. So we wouldn't be able to get the 2.2. We couldn't say, hey, we'll take the 2.2 to Tremont Construction without having the
rest.
other 15
Right.
available. We
Mark,
have to have a
that
fully funded
2.2,
project.
could we use that for segments 1, 3, and 4?
Because it would be modal.
It's federal money.
It's still
Well,
multimodal.
no, because it's for, remember, this current bucket of money is right-of-way money.
Correct. It was
We don't
awarded
have
to
right of
us.
way for 3, or we do?
It was awarded to us as right-of-way money.
Okay.
Right away, not construct over the right of way.
Right.
Right.
So right now, it's right-of-way money that would de-obligate it. We have no construction funding, and nor do I have the ability to apply for construction funding until the right-of-way certification is complete. The right-of-way certification is about a 6-month process with local programs to review every file, make sure that the diaries are correct, make sure that the administrative offers were acceptable within federal limits. So we have a right-of-way certification for Tremont, for example, and we're just now waiting for construction funding to build that project. I can't apply for construction funding on Bay Street until we have that right-of-way certification.
Is right-of-way certification for each phase, or is it for the whole thing?
Project.
Because we don't really have Titus, as you said earlier, so you're going to have to figure that one out too, I suppose. Huh?
For what's that?
The Ford dealer.
Right. Well, again, that was our initial
Up and down
funding,
about
was
this.
to get the easement from Bay Ford and from Roger Coyle and the Comfort Inn. We put that on hold when this issue came up.
Is that the 425,000?
Right. Because initially, that was enough money to just purchase those easements from two people, because again, the Comfort Inn's compelled to provide the easement.
I do have a question. I always thought that we could put this pathway in with those houses there. And I know that the path would narrow from the 14 down to 10 feet for a period of time to make that corner. What if we didn't provide parking? What if the homeowners agreed to the whole thing without a parking? What if we took the right-of-way? What if they agreed to that? Is there any way of getting that 4 feet by moving that road over?
If
10.
If all 5 homeowners agreed to have a pathway built up to their doorknob and not have any place to park and put that in writing, then I would think that the Department of Transportation may be compelled to look at providing the deviation, but you would still score lowly and potentially struggle to get construction funding. But I don't know if I wouldn't want a pathway right to my doorknob and no place to park.
You raise an interesting question, though, or comment that you just made, that if we were to build it up to the doorknobs, would it have to be a deviated plan?
Yes.
Yes.
It would be 10 feet.
10.
Right now, the 10 feet is up to the doorknob. To go non-deviated, we would have to shift as much as we can to the east. We'd still be 2 to 3 feet into the buildings.
Current roadway.
And then the doorknob, there's still, when you look at the survey, and I know that Mr. Jones, we provided plans, there's still a number of what I'll just say, encroachments, where the upland connects some concrete structures, like Passau, that entire wooden platform that they park on is all in the right-of-way. And so that whole structure, that concrete bearing, a lot of the structural pieces of these 5 overwater homes are actually within the right-of-way. So there were issues, there's always been some structural concerns, even going past those houses in that close proximity, of how we'd structurally connect the pathway and then keep that structure supported as we went past. So it's, you know, as a public works director, I would say that one is I don't think it's a benefit to those people to have a not having parking.
Yeah, Mr. Jones, there'll be an opportunity at the end of this meeting for some more discussion, I mean, public comment. But, so take a note and then.
Isn't a public hearing.
Mr. Patonso, you had your.
I actually would like to make a motion to schedule at our next meeting an executive session and then continue this dialogue after we have the executive session. Because I think we're going to get a lot of our questions answered and then be able to have more meaningful dialogue after we've had the rest of the information provided to us.
We need a motion to do that, or can we just say, hey, let's do that?
Yeah.
What?
If there is a consensus among council as to what Councilmember
I'd like it
Patonso
at the
just
next
proposed, you don't need a
meeting
formal motion.
myself.
Next council meeting, not study session.
Next council meeting, are you?
Yes.
How busy is our next
I will not be in
study session?
attendance at the next council meeting.
The very next one?
Right, August 26th, I will not be.
Ms. Reinerson, what does it look like on your
It's going to be very.
Yeah, August's work study session's already at 2 hours and probably will go longer, but I'd be happy to rearrange it or have a long evening, whichever you prefer. And then the first meeting in September is your retreat. So it'd be September 16th work study session.
Brandy, I was going to pull an item off of work study for next week, if that helps. I think it was a 20-minute item.
Yeah, you're still looking at 1 hour and 40 minutes, assuming that my estimated times are correct. But I mean, it's.
Mr. Clausen.
Is there a clock ticking on this? I mean, is this something that you need a decision like tomorrow, or what happens if it's the first meeting in September?
No. Well, it'd be the second meeting because the first meeting's your retreat. But no, I think it's just been.
I'm not.
We've been
out of town that
The
second meeting in September. I think we should do it next week myself and bump some things off our work study.
I'm sorry I won't be here, and this is too important to me.
So you're not going to be at the work study?
Right.
Well, maybe we bump the retreat. Oh, I'm sorry, Brandy. That probably drive her crazy.
Maybe it's
add to it.
Retreat night.
What about retreat night?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most
I'll put this on as an item that I would like to discuss at the retreat. It is very important.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're discussing a executive session.
Executive session.
You
It's
can
not
have an
an-
executive session separate from the retreat. I mean,
Yes.
Right. I mean, your retreat is essentially just a special meeting.
Yeah.
A special
of the
work
council.
study, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
we
we
can
certainly
have an executive
can
session.
have an executive session, yes.
So you're all more or less saying that would be the
think that's
best
the
time.
best.
to go.
Best
And everybody can be there. Okay,
Yes.
great.
Okay, so that's
That's Monday, Tuesday, September 9th.
Yes.
Yes.
Everybody,
necessarily after.
all right.
No. So that'd be.
Is there any more discussion? Let's see.
I'm sure there will be, but not tonight.
Not tonight. Okay, very good. We'll move.
Mr. Mayor, can I just quickly thank Mr. Dorsey for his time and his candor and his good memory. Thank you.
All right, 7D, LIS server failure. Mr. Bond, could you tell us about that, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of council. On the morning of Thursday, July 31st, 2014, the city's 12-year-old LIS computer server failed and was unable to be repaired. This system hardware failure resulted in the city being unable to access its public works building and planning permitting software, and it meant the city was unable to issue or process permits. The department heads, in consultation with IT and Paladin, the maker of the permitting software, evaluated the city's options. The first option that we considered was server replacement. We contacted Dell and learned that a new server could be delivered in about a week and then could be configured to run the LIS permitting software. Taking this action would have resulted in the city being unable to issue permits for at least a week. The city would have had to install a version of Microsoft operating system dating from 2003 on this new machine, since the permitting software is not compatible with more recent server systems. This option would have cost $7,300 for the hardware cost, and then would have had to been configured at pretty extensive time for Vince in IT and also Paladin. The second option that we considered was an option brought up by Paladin. They had an old server that they had decommissioned that had LIS installed on it. It was about 10 years old, and they offered to loan it to us as a stopgap while we figured out how to proceed. They made this offer with the intent that the city would initiate the migration to the new SmartGov permitting software immediately. The loaner did put us back online. They ended up getting it up and running on Monday, August 4th, and they didn't charge us for this, so they spent the weekend configuring it and got it set up for us. The migration to SmartGov, it was originally discussed, and I know it's been brought up during the permitting fee discussion. It's been brought up at the Finance Committee and at Economic Development, and we were planning on putting that forward in the 2015 budget request for the department for both Mark's budget and my budget. We're proposing to accelerate that for 2014 to get it up and running, hopefully by November or December. The city received quotes for switching to SmartGov, and the quotes consist of two fees. There's an upfront setup cost, it's a one-time cost, and then there's an annual subscription cost, which includes licensing and ongoing support. The one-time cost is going to be $20,350, regardless of whether we do it in 2014 or 2015. The annual cost, the current LIS system, we currently pay $7,600 a year for that software, and the SmartGov is $12,900 or $16,000 once we introduce a feature which would allow the public to go online to view their permit status. So we are proposing to accelerate our plans to go to SmartGov, and I've broken down the range of costs for 2014, 2015, and 2016, and every year thereafter. And so our proposal now is to bring a contract forward which would get the ball rolling, because it takes them about 3 months to set up the new server or the new cloud-based system, and to migrate all of our existing data over to the new system, and that would take us live probably around November 1st, maybe as late as December 1st, depending on how smoothly things go. And I'll say, you know, last year during the budget process, we discussed this at length and ultimately decided to put it off for a year. I think that Mark and I and our departments needed a little bit more time to study the issue. So we've had time to do that, and we've been moving forward with this plan to move to SmartGov. But actually doing this now and doing the migration during winter when permitting is slow is probably better for us logistically than waiting until May of next year to try and do this when things are really picking up. So it is our preference actually to go ahead and move forward with this and bring a contract to the next meeting under the parameters that I set forward in my memo.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Clausen.
Nick, why SmartGov? Is there other software packages out there that will do the same thing?
Yeah, there are quite a few, and we've looked into them. I think we looked into Springbrook, which is the same platform that we use for our finance software. Comparatively, the systems do the same thing, but they operate and they look and feel very different. Every jurisdiction in Kitsap County, Bainbridge Island, Paulsbo, Gig Harbor is in Pierce County, but and the county are all on the SmartGov platform or are in the process of migrating to it. And so from a user perspective, when you go online and you look at what you can do with the county, you can apply for a permit online. Every city in the county is going to have that same look and feel no matter where you're doing business, and I think for the building community that's going to create a familiarity that is beneficial and is going to make things easy on everyone. SmartGov is also based in the county here. Their office is up in Paulsbo. But again, the other part of it is migrating all of the old data. If we went to any other system, all of the old history would be lost, and we'd still have to maintain a server to access our old records because they can't be migrated into some new system in the same way. So functionally, we would have to buy that server and continue to maintain it into the future in order to have access to those old records, or we'd have to manually enter it all into the new system, which would be very costly. So it's difficult to switch platforms.
Well, and it might be helpful to know that Paladin, the existing system, the new name is SmartGov. So what we're really doing is migrating to the newer software that's available.
Yeah, and we did do a
But it's the
selection
same
process.
company then?
It's the same company, just different software version. And so we did do a selection process. We saw interviews from different companies and ultimately decided that this was the best one for us and was going to be logistically the easiest for us and the most cost-effective to make the switch and the upgrade.
Got a question?
Okay, Mr. Clausen, does that answer your question?
It does, thank you, sir.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Childs.
So we were sailing along and then our server failed, right? Right.
Well,
That's how it started. The server went down,
Yeah,
and
and-
you said, "Oh gosh, what are we going to do?"
And I think the
So-
server has been, we've been talking about the need for that for a few years now.
Okay, I don't care. We were paying a certain amount of money, right, annually to maintain and make this system work. How much were we paying prior to going into this?
There
new
was probably
startup?
an upfront fee at one time, which I don't know, but annually it was $76.97 for licenses for both departments.
So we've been paying all along $76.97 per year
For the
kind of a
software.
subscription cost.
Just for the use of the software, not for the hardware.
Okay.
We-
because we own the hardware, right?
Correct.
And that's what failed.
Okay. But so I'm just trying to see how much more we're spending by going to the new thing from what we're actually doing. So it was 76 something, and now we're going to go and spend maybe, depending on whether we do a web portal, either 12.9 or 16.6.
Correct. And so that's a net increase of a little more than $5,000. And we did pass the technology fee as part of the fee increase, which is supposed to cover that difference. And but it doesn't cover the one-time upfront cost.
Okay.
That's my question, Mr. Martin. What do you propose we get the $20,000?
The issue is whether or not you end ending cash with $20,000 and on January 1st, 2015, budget to spend the $20,000 and out of beginning cash, or whether or not to just take it from ending fund balance cash and pay for it December 31st of this year and pay it in the current budget year. So the economics of the purchase are exactly the same.
So,
it's
we have the cash at this
It's going
point.
to come out of ending cash balance. And we looked at this. This was a very serious problem for the city of Port Orchard. And I think you all know because of the emails that were exchanged, staff did a good job of working over the weekend, and Paladin as a partner came in and had over 24 hours of man hours into it. Vince had probably about 10 hours, and we're up against it when we're trying to be customer orientated in this, and Nick's people were just great at trying to keep this thing going. So this was a real crash of a hardware, and that's why we keep reserves. That's why you've been conservative through the years. That's why we have a stabilization fund for when these things try to happen, or when they unfortunately happen. So we'll go to ending cash balance, and it'd be my recommendation to do that.
The nice part is their request for the 2015 budget will be $20,000 less.
Less, that's right. It won't follow into the
We'll
next
hold them
year.
to that. Okay.
Any other
Other thing I
questions?
might-
So when will we make the decision whether to do web portal or not web portal?
Well, the contract that I would propose to bring forward next meeting would have no web portal in 2014 or 2015, and it would have an option for a web portal in 2016, and we can exercise that option if we choose.
Okay. Okay.
Would we be the only city in the county that lacks a web portal?
I think that the other I know the county has it. I don't know that anybody has taken it live, but I know that they're trying to. And so I don't know, I haven't heard the latest from Paulsbo or Bainbridge Island, but I think they're kind of like us. They're waiting to roll it out until they get the underlying software running smoothly in so that everybody's trained on it before they introduce the new feature.
Okay.
Let somebody else work the bugs out of it, namely the county, maybe.
Well, thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Any other?
It's going to cost us a bunch.
All right.
I would be supportive of moving forward in 2014.
Does anyone care to make a motion?
Said we don't need
Oh,
it.
that's right. Well, I have Mr. Clausen made the motion. Did you?
No. A motion for what? They're just going to bring
This is a
forward an
discussion only
agreement.
item.
Oh, this is discussion only, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, very good. We had additional item 7E.
Require an executive session.
Yes, why don't I introduce it, though, very briefly, and then council can decide whether you want to go into executive session. So this relates to the property at 640 Bay Street, and council had directed me to negotiate with the receiver who is in control of that property. I have done so. I believe I have an agreement. It would be appropriate to discuss some of the details in executive session, but then absolutely, if you're interested in acting on this, we need to come out and have a more full discussion in the public, and I'll help you through that, and I'll have a recommendation as part of that public comment open session discussion. Relates to 640 Bay Street. Potentially. They haven't decided to do anything. Whether to acquire real estate, yes. Yep. Yep.
Now,
So-
Mr. Jacoby, would it be in order for us to go into that executive session now?
I think it would make sense because you might come out and it might be over
5
quickly.
minutes? I'm going to take a 2
Nothing
minute
happens. 5 minutes.
restroom break.
What's your recommendation for the time for this executive session?
Yeah, he's going to get there. Whatever count, I mean, I would like to review a couple of the key terms. I can do it in 5 minutes, yes.
We never do
What's
anything
your
in 5
pleasure
minutes.
then? 10 minutes?
10 minutes.
10
We never
minutes.
do anything in 5
Everybody
minutes.
gets 5 minutes?
We can't even say
So
hello
we'll
in
do,
5 minutes.
we will go into executive session for 10 minutes on real estate matters, and it's pursuant to RCW 4230 110 1 and A, which has to do with real estate, so. And there may be an action taken when we return.
Yes, I do want you there.
And would you please join? I would really, I think it'd be.
So, Mayor, if I can continue then.
Yes, please do.
With this action item. So
Oh,
again,
just a moment here. How many more minutes do you have? I pretty much had time.
16 seconds.
Take a deep
We'll wait.
breath, Greg.
I took the liberty of using our new timer system for the executive session, so everybody
Oh,
knew
nice
when it's
job.
time to. I would have come
So is the
knocking.
light going to go red or green when we can start talking?
It's gonna be a surprise,
Red.
and it flashes. All right.
Okay. Now, Mr. Jacoby, please go ahead and continue.
all
if you
right.
would.
So regarding 640 Bay Street, now this is the former Mexican restaurant property just around the corner on Bay Street that had a fire. The property is in receivership, and the city has been in discussions with the receiver, a company called Turnaround, Inc., regarding the purchase of the property. The city has considered and reviewed an appraisal of the property. It has considered the costs of demolition and abatement, and it's the city's desire that sad-looking building come down, and that we have a clear parcel, clean parcel. So my office has negotiated with the receiver. We've reached agreement within the terms of authority that the council has provided. The receiver is willing to sell the property to the city for the price of $148,000, and the receiver will demolish the existing structure and be responsible for the cost of asbestos removal. And they've already done the inspection and know that there is asbestos that needs to be removed. So they would essentially be turning over to the city a clean, piece of property with no structure, all asbestos removed, and the city could then begin to explore whatever development options it or private partners might have, might be of interest. So I don't know if there's anything else. If I can answer any other questions, the receiver will notify the city when the demolition and asbestos removal work is done. The city will have 14 days to inspect the property to confirm that it's acceptable. The property will be conveyed to the city free and clear of all liens and encumbrances. Because this property is in, the receiver has already signed the purchase and sale agreement that you have copies of. Should the council approve this purchase and sale agreement, it will still need to go back to the judge that is overseeing the receivership for formal approval. The receiver, however, tells me that they do not expect any opposition from the judge or any stakeholders. No opposition to the proposed sale. So, so staff recommends approval of the purchase and sale agreement and authorizing the mayor to execute the document.
Oh, yes, Mr. Clausen.
Just a question, comment, Greg. We've received, or the receiver has provided us a copy of an environmental review as well, a preliminary.
Yes, staff has reviewed an environmental site assessment, phase 1, for the property, which indicated that there are no underground storage tanks or pipes. Over the last 100 years, there certainly have been, I think, a gas station and some other uses around that property, but nothing on the property per se. We have no reason to believe there's any release of any hazardous substances on the property.
Yes, Mr. Patonsu.
I move to approve the purchase and sale agreement Mr. Pechovi's firm is prepared regarding 640 Bay Street.
Seconded.
All right, there's a motion and a second. We are open for discussion. Would you raise your hand? Yes, Mr.
I
Thompson.
just want to comment on the fact that we've had multiple executive sessions on this property, and why I'm supporting this is I don't want to look at what we have on that site for the next 3 to 5 to who knows how many years. A part of our due diligence, because of our public processes and prevailing wage requirements and the attorney fees required, we would have paid substantially more for this piece of property had we gone through an abatement and demolition process ourselves. So I think this is the best alternative to acquire this property this way. And the seller is assuming all the risk related to the demolition and abatement. So I think it's a good deal for us.
Anyone on this side? Anybody else?
Mr.
Cartwright.
He summarized my position perfectly. Thank you, Mr. Patonsu.
Ms. Lucarelli.
I actually am not in favor of buying the property, and I've talked about that before. I don't like the city buying up property around. But I feel like if we are actually going to move forward with getting rid of that property afterward, and that's what I think part of our agreement is, we're not hanging on to that. Is that correct? But that's not part of what we're agreeing to here.
That's not a decision that's been made yet.
I would say that's not part of the agreement
All
we're
right.
talking about tonight.
All right. Well, that's part of my problem, is that I don't like the city buying up property and holding on to it. I had a problem with the parking lot across the street and how much money we lost on that. So that will be why I'm voting against it.
Any other discussion? Yes, Mr. Childs.
Well, I'm going to vote no, too, and it has a little bit to do with our discussions. Am I bound, Mr. Jacoby, by the executive session? I mean, the discussions we had in there, can I now talk openly, or are those lost to me as far as being able to express what I'm thinking?
The topic that we discussed in executive session related to the value of the land, the price and so that stuff you cannot discuss. The broader policy issues that you may
reasonings and things.
That's fair. That's fair game for public.
Okay. Well, my thinking is that we initially talked about that, and the property. The initial price was guessed at around 60 or so, and all they wanted was the demolition cost of it all. And then there was a discussion that there's something we could do with the property, and it would be a public-private partnership with the city. Then we thought some more about it, then thought about, maybe we could take this property and make sure that it doesn't become a liability problem, and that if people don't do a good job with that property as far as the demolition and the cleaning up the site, that maybe we should be in charge of it to make sure it comes forward properly. And so our rationale for doing it has kind of evolved a little bit, I thought. And so in looking at that, I still, a little bit like Councilwoman Lucarelli, look across the street and see a building we bought for nearly $500,000 that we turned into a $100,000, if that, parking lot. And I don't think we're good landlords. And so what we then do next, it isn't decided. And so now we're waived, by the way, and we're not doing $60,000 now. Now we're up to $148,000. And to me, it's just, I don't think this, I think we should just let the property owner do what they're supposed to do. And if they don't do it right, then we take action against them. But I'm just not in favor of this.
Anybody else? Ms. Ashby?
Yes, I am supporting the purchase of 640 Bay Street for a number of reasons, not the least of which I believe we have a responsibility to have a safe downtown, and I find this structure as it is right now a liability to us. And this is the most efficient way that I can see for us to make our downtown more presentable, and I think we have a responsibility to do that.
Mr. Clausen.
I'm going to support this purchase for some of the same reasons that Ms. Ashby just indicated, but I also think that in the event that the current property owner decided to not tear it down, then we may be forced to go in there and tear it down. And what we've learned, that if we were forced to do that, it would cost us way more than the property is worth. So we would have a lien against a piece of property that would be greater than the value of the property. So I think this is kind of a win-win situation. I agree that generally speaking, I don't think the city should be in the development business. But I think in this particular case, there's a variety of issues that suggest that we should go forward. And I agree with the safety. I agree with the cleanliness of our downtown rapidly. And, you know, maybe we can find somebody we can sell this property to that will develop it into whatever is a productive piece of property and not an eyesore. So I certainly am for that.
Okay. Does anybody else wish to? All right, then. The motion on the floor is to authorize the mayor to sign the purchase and sale agreement with the receiver. Should we say not to exceed the $148,000, or that's?
Well, there's
no,
fees.
it's for 148.
It is.
That is the
sign the
price.
agreement for
Plus
100.
fees.
Okay.
Plus fees.
Plus
Yeah.
fees.
Plus fees. All right. Everybody is clear on what we're going to be voting on. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed? Nay.
Nay.
Could those opposed raise their hand, and we'll just, okay. For the record, 2 opposed. That motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. What a report of council committees. Finance Committee, Mr. Clausen.
Well, I would like to just point out a couple things that took place at our last Finance Committee meeting. One, we had a report on the sales tax receipts, which have been kind of up and down, but generally speaking, I think year-to-date we're about 1% over what our budget projections indicated, so we're doing okay in that regard. The other thing that the committee heard was a report from there's a wireless capital company who wanted to buy out the leases, if you will, with the city, pay us an upfront amount in exchange for their ability to negotiate and lease some cell tower locations that we have. And the committee listened to it. They had offered a one-time payment of about $270,000, but the committee felt that over the 10-year period that we were talking about, that would be a reduction in what we would normally have received. And if we were to get that $200,000 and spend it right away, we basically would have been done with it, as opposed to our current, we're getting annual income that's going to amount to more than that 200. So the committee's recommendation was that we not go forward with that lease option. The other thing that we talked about briefly, we got a report that the cost of living index for the June to June period has been published. That's the period that we use for our labor agreements, and it's indicating about a 2% increase. So as we build the 2015 budget, we'll be building it with that kind of in mind. We did hear from the clerk in regards to the phone system that we dealt with tonight. We also had a discussion with Mr. Dorsey over a couple projects, is what's going on. But one of them in particular was the Tremont project. And the committee has asked the question, that we understand that if we got a clock ticking on us, that we have to get that project built, or we're going to be faced with paying back an awful lot of money to the federal government. The other thing that we heard is that it's a complete project of $17 million and growing, and it's really hard to find grant funding to do those large projects now. So our request was, could we pay for ourselves the funds necessary to redesign the project so that it could be done in pieces, segments. And what we heard was, under the current rules, we could not do that. And it was probably similar to the discussion we just had with the Bay Street pedestrian path. When you scope the project initially, which we did, it's from point A to point B, and that's what we're obligated to build. And if you change that, then you're violating the rules. Now, those rules are established by the feds. So the committee's feeling is that right now we're kind of obligated, and we should continue to pursue funding for it, as unlikely as it may be. You never know when there might be a windfall. But we should also pursue with Congressman Kilmer about what do we need to do to get these rules changed so that we can possibly build this thing in phases and or get that clock to stop. So, you know, I kind of feel like we got a gun to our head that we're just waiting, hopefully, to get this thing done before that clock runs out. So we're kind of in a multi approach to this animal, and one is keep looking for money, and two, we should be working with our congressional delegation about we need some help here. And you guys kind of changed the rules on us after we had already started the project, so we think there should be some relief there. So that's pretty much it, and we've got another meeting scheduled.
Okay, thank you. Economic Development, Tourism.
Mayor, it's after 10, and the council should make a motion to extend the meeting.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Can we extend this?
Aye.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yeah,
Oppose me. You have one.
Might have been a little ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, so do you guys want to set a time so that
So we're done.
So we're done? Okay, all right.
Yes, the Economic Development Committee met yesterday, and I will just piggyback on what Mr. Clausen was just saying. The Economic Development Committee has discussed the Tremont situation at a couple of our meetings in general terms, and we have requested that the issue be put on a work study agenda so that all of us can have a dialogue at the same time and review all the options that Mr. Clausen had mentioned, in addition to options that had come out of the economic development meeting. So we've requested that to be put on a work study. Yesterday we did get our first month's report on the foot ferry ridership, and the numbers, and this was again the first month. It was, I'm not even sure it was a full month. I think it was about 3 weeks. And Sundays are picking up. Sundays do not look dismal. Fridays and Saturdays have not generated a lot of traffic on the ferry yet, but we're hoping now that some marketing has been done that will increase. We had a discussion yesterday on the importance or the need for a tourism or public event coordination within the city. We reviewed the necessary actions for a more effective and successful flow for our public events. And we talked about the role of the city, Visit Kitsap, and various nonprofits, and basically outlined, tasks that we felt, actions that we felt needed to be done to for us to do a better job on tourism. And again, we've referred that to work study. We introduced an idea of how to execute business retention and development and the importance of a strong economic development element in our 2016 comprehensive plan. We talked about doing internally for this city what the Kitsap Economic Development Alliance does regionally for us. We also reviewed a proposed outreach survey as an element of the economic development element for the comprehensive plan. We have one of the university students that was involved with the project last winter, is an intern in Nick's department this summer, and he's putting together a survey as an outreach for economic development and how the community feels about that. Nick also introduced us to a Department of Commerce grant loan program. He provided us the link to a website which we can make available to all council members if you wanted to look at that and see what is available through the Department of Commerce for economic development loans. And that was pretty much what we did. And we'll be meeting again on September 8th at 10 o'clock here at City Hall.
All right, thank you. Utility Committee and Sewer Advisory Committee, Mr. Patonsu.
We have not met. I was hoping that Mr. Dorsey and Clausen and Mr. Lucarelli could hang around for 5 minutes after tonight's meeting so we could schedule our next meeting. Okay. And the Sewer Advisory Committee meets on the 27th. We haven't met since our last council meeting either.
Okay, thank you. Public Property Committee, Mr. Cartwright.
Our last meeting was July 28th here in the council. We had 5 agenda items. Our discussion, or first item, was the impact to the annexing for some certain properties where they went from an R30 within the county to the city only has an R20. That led to a couple of conversations about potentially grandfathering or not, and so I think the council can see that coming forward at a future work study session. Another issue that we had was the use of e-cigarettes. The committee felt that we should probably treat e-cigarettes the same as the tobacco policy. In a discussion with Ms. Reinerson earlier tonight, she's informed me that the police chief is looking into that as far as an enforcement issue. So we'll be coming back to that issue and get some more information. We looked at the McCormick Park rules, and in that it was discovered by Mr. Bond that the city does not have an overall parks rules. So we did approve a McCormick Park sign, but in the time since then, in the future, Nick will be working on park rules that could be applied citywide, and then the thought process would go from there that if a specific addition or amendment to a specific park was needed, we can deviate for that particular park. Ms. Reinerson brought forward a request from the Pinkinator food truck to park their truck in an area near the courthouse. We kicked that around for a little bit. They are looking to take 2 stalls, parking stalls, in an area that we already felt sometimes suffers for parking at certain times during the week. We're going to bring that forward to work study session, more than likely with a 90-day trial recommendation and potential review of other potential sites in that area as well. And then the last item that we discussed was Ms. Reinerson's update of the street vacation that we've all previously seen drafts of. We reviewed that, and that'll be coming forward in a resolution format to City Council. Our next meeting will be on September 8th at 8:30 in these chambers.
Okay, thank you. All right, public property, we just had that. Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, Mr. Chang.
The committee met on Wednesday, July 30th, and we basically introduced ourselves and we streamlined the application. We wanted to make it a little simpler for the applicants to fill out and for the people evaluating them to be able to compare. And I believe those applications have gone out, or they're currently on our website, and they're due back, I think, the 25th. And the committee members will be reviewing them and interviewing applicants in September.
Okay, very good, thank you. Chimes and Lights, Ms. Lucarelli.
We had a great first meeting, and we're discovering who's on board, and it looks like pretty much everybody who's been involved in the past is going to be moving forward again with us this year. That is December 6th. We are moving the Chimes and Lights event to 1/2 hour earlier than it's been in the past, so that it's a little bit closer to the Jingle Bell Run, fills in that gap a little bit, and then doesn't take that quite so late for families. Our theme this year is Sleigh Bells Ring, Port Orchard Glistening. And it will be a very fun event. Next meeting, September 10th, 3:30 here at City Hall. Thank you.
Waterfront Plan, Mr. Childs.
We haven't actually had a meeting, but the reason we haven't had a meeting is we haven't had any staffing, as you probably remember. So you probably don't need to ask that anymore unless
Okay. All right.
staffing is going to be allowed
Start it
or something.
next. I think we talked about staffing it first part of next year. So, okay. Outside agency committee reports, Ms. Ashby, do you have anything?
Well, the PSRC and the KRCC basically take August off. They're silent during August. So we will not be attending meetings until September.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Patonsu?
I was not able to attend my
Mr. Cartwright, do you have anything? No, okay. I had some things I just really badly wanted to read, good news articles about things in the city, but because of the late hour, I'm going to reduce them to just a couple of things. The first one is, you probably, all you folks know Tony Lang, who works for Public Works. We received this email. Major kudos to Tony at the Port Orchard Public Works Water Quality Department. I called this morning to complain about the water and to ask questions about what could be the problem. I fully expected the bureaucratic party line, but instead I got a huge surprise. He was honest, admitted they had a lot of complaints, and that they had increased the flushing of the lines to 3 times a year instead of once. He offered to have someone come flush the line to the house and said he'd be in touch. I expected a phone call in the next week or two, or at least after I paid my bill. I went home for lunch 45 minutes later, and Tony himself was there. Oh my goodness, he was so helpful and informative and said he'd flushed the pipes from my house to the meter. He ended up replacing the meter, and then he came up to the house and told me I was right. The water was the color of Guinness, and in fact contributed to the problem. I'm on a dead-end street, so the sediment settles there at the end of the line. There's no hydrant, so the problem is worse. The old meter also contributed, and he replaced that. Tony told us that he ran the water till it was clear, but expects some discoloration the first few minutes. Sure enough, there was some, but it cleaned up right away. Anyway, I want to give thanks and credit where it's due. I am very impressed and pleased at the service and the integrity of Tony Lang. And I'm impressed also, Tony, but this isn't the first time we've heard these kind of things from departments. So I just wanted you all to be proud of our folks working for us every day. We did get, again, for the fourth year in a row, Well City designation. Deb Howard, we would simply not have gotten that award any of those years if it hadn't been for all the hard work Deb Howard has put into it. I do have a newsletter downstairs, and did we put any up here on the table? No, I don't think we did. But they're on the way out the door, right in front of you. It's the yellow version, and it just came out today. It talks about that Well City Award on this side. A couple of other things that have happened since I talked to you last. Bikers took over downtown Port Orchard last Sunday, but it was scheduled, and it was really a lot of fun. And there's a picture in the newsletter about that. We had the first ever Port Orchard motorcycle show down there Sunday afternoon. A lot of fun. It talks about that. There's a couple of upcoming events I want you to be aware of. Of course, Thursday, waterfront, concerts by the bay, farmers markets on Saturday and on Sunday in Port Orchard. Next council meeting is August 26th. And we have a work study session August 19th that's the public can sit in and watch. So anyway, there's a couple of things coming up at the end of the month. There's Christian Life is doing a car, bike, and truck show on the 24th, and on the 31st we have the Taste of Port Orchard. So those are a couple of things to be aware of, and that's my report. So we'll go on to reports of department heads. Mr. Dorsey.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Nicole and Vance Vaught for the letter we got on the Tremont Place water service replacement. They thanked the Public Works Department and the contractor for being very efficient and just doing an outstanding job with a limited amount of disruption. So I just wanted to thank them for that acknowledgement.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Martin. Okay, Mr. Bond.
You should have gotten an email from me today about a short course on planning scheduled for October 13th. If you would mark your calendar, we'll advertise it as a joint Planning Commission Council meeting, and it'll give you a lot of valuable information on the comp plan update process and also on capital facility planning and how to do that effectively.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jacoby.
Nothing, Your Honor. Thank you.
Clerk Reinerson.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide the council an update that for the lodging tax funds, I've been directed by a couple of the committees, the Chimes and Lights Committee and the Economic Development Committee, to submit applications for that funding, and just wanted to open up to the rest of the council if they're interested in any of the departments putting an application for LTAC that promotes events or tourism for the city. Just send that staff department an email and we'll get working on it before the 25th. Other than that, that's all I had.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're at citizens' comments. Last option for citizen comment, please.
Randy Jones, of course. There's discussion about which property might sell and which property might not sell. But it appears that the whole project would break down to all 5 properties selling if I don't, if the plan has to go with the entire 14 feet for the whole segment of Section 5, from what I gather. So if some of us didn't want to sell it, I don't see where you get your funding if I'm not correct on that. If 2 of us sold and 3 of us didn't, or vice versa, or whatever, you wouldn't have your 14 feet. So going back to the deviation, a lot of discussion on what I would want in regards to my parking, and whether or not I would, me and some of the others, would accept the road right away going, the bike path going right up to our front door, and I don't have a problem with it. I just asked for parking across the street. Now, it appears that our 5 houses are the only houses that seem to have a right-of-way issue in and out of their property. But when you go around the corner, all the others, this 14-foot path goes right up to almost up to their doors. They just don't happen to be built on the water. So I don't understand that issue. It seems to me the liability of buying 5 homes at $2 or $3 million, seems to me that the original plans a few years ago about parking across the road, I don't know why those aren't still on the table. I don't have a problem with parking a couple of my cars across the road on the city property, and I don't have a problem with the bike path going right up to my front door. I can live with that if I'm parking across the street. The ingress and egress, they were was talked about not being able to go to our properties, but again, around the corner, all 12 of those properties, the 6-plex especially, he's not going to be able to park directly in front of his house. So why isn't his house on the chopping block? And today I heard Mr. Dorsey talking about the project wouldn't be approved unless the 5 houses are gone. But she made it clear that mitigation was not part of the discussion. It sounds like to me mitigation is part of the discussion. Otherwise, you wouldn't need our 5 homes to come down. So there's some serious issues on that mitigation there. Anyway, yes, no, I want the path. I want the path. I want the path to go right in front of my house. I want to be able to park across the road, and I don't want to lose any parking. Just put it across the road. And I do not want to sell. And if I don't sell, is the project in jeopardy because they require it to have their 14 feet the whole way? So I'm not sure where that issue is.
Yeah, we'll get some answers.
Yeah,
Okay.
I want the bike path right in front of my house, and I want parking across the road, and I'm happy.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Franklin Rusk again, 1777 Bay Street. It was spoken before against the one-way portion of the project, or the option. And the person that came up here from Tracy Avenue said that he would have 6,000 people driving in front of his house. Personally, I don't think that is true, because that's assuming that everybody that takes that road now will take that route. Don't know how many times I've come down Mile Hill, taken a right down only to my house, and the cars in front of me are coming down Mile Hill. They take Bay Street because they believe it is a shortcut to downtown. So those people aren't going to be taken that way. And if you make the Bay Street eastbound and Tracy westbound, I think you're going to alleviate, not alleviate, but a lot of the people will not be taking that route anymore because it'll actually be slower. And people use between Olney and downtown as a shortcut all the time. And I asked the city council years ago if they would consider doing anything to slow down the traffic. My request was refused. And then you widen the road and tilt it even more, making it safer at higher speeds. And now you want to build a boardwalk because unsafe traffic. Well, that is not our fault, so we shouldn't have to pay for it. And earlier, when you were saying that, for instance, Fred Chang was saying this could take 2 years, this could take 5 years, this could take 10 years. And then Mark Dorsey spoke right up, it could take 6 months. And then 5 minutes later, he says the process could take 6 months. It's my opinion that he's already made his decision. It's my opinion that he is going to go forward on this. It is, yeah. I would. When it's time to go before God and explain this to him, I'd love to be there.
Okay, yes, please.
Good job. I'm impressed at how much work you guys get done. The option that hasn't been considered is widening Bay Street inland, and that's something even doesn't have to be the whole way, but you need the 14 feet, and then the upland hills, even the houses of Norman Ray and John, the homeowners were here, the first ones that testified on Perry tonight, saying that they don't want the houses in front of them removed, and those are their lands that you'd have to go into. I feel like that hasn't been fully fleshed out with creativity. I don't want to lower the score. I want the city able to get permitting, so I think there's room there for 14 feet and a road if we go inland. I don't think that's, but please don't kick the can. Make a decision. I pulled the Band-Aid off. Make your decision on September 9th. Decide what you're going to do. This has gone on for almost, my daughter is now 4. We started when she was 1. I want to have fun with my kids. I cried after the 4th of July fireworks. This is not cool. Just make a decision, pull the Band-Aid off, be bad people, be good people. It's on your conscience, that's fine. Give me lots, yeah. So, and then the 2011 PowerPoint, can you make sure they see that? That was the original one that shows where the lines are. Because it doesn't go up to the doorknob on my house. There's parking in front of my house, there's parking in front of John's house, there's parking in front of Norman Ray's. And I would like that to be, pardon? I own the right-of-way at my house.
No, you don't.
According to the city, I do. According to Kitsap County records, according to Universal Field Services, according to Cindy Wembley. Okay, that's a point of discussion for negotiation.
If you could come tomorrow, maybe discuss this, and look at the maps, so we're all on the same page.
It's in the legal description of my property. I own to the center of Bay Street, but that's a sidebar. But the PowerPoint from 2011, pardon? Yeah, no, you're right. Okay. For the PowerPoint in 2011 shows where the lines are on each of the properties. And I know, I think Fred Chang was on the council then and Mr. Childs, but I'd like to, because it isn't all doorknobs. That's a very wide breadth of where the lines actually are. So I'd like you to be able to see where the lines actually are when you're making decisions. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
1985, I know I'm not on the term, but I guess it is. In 1985, Lorraine, the previous owner of Ocean Orleans House, created the property line issues, went to the city and created a storm like something similar to this. Anyway, it was the city that decided where the property lines were, and Lorraine bought the property that she parks on.
Okay.
And I bought the purchase, but it was the city property lines that sold us the property, saying, so that we weren't encroaching, like Mr. Dorsey is saying, so that we were not encroaching.
Okay.
This is the city's lines.
Right. This is a different subject for another time.
The city right away goes into our homes. It doesn't. And if it did, it's the city's fault in 1985, because the city addressed it and made us purchase, made us spend money to buy the property that our house sits on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
We still have that lawyer for that purpose, too.
Okay. Yes.
I know you're tired, but something that happened last week before ballots had to go on, I went up to the senior moment the county courthouse to turn in my ballot, and there's supposed to be 2 spots for you to be able to hop out of your car and put your ballot in a place and then leave. But people are parking in those spots, and I was irritated and found a spot to park and went in and talked to the lady, one of the ladies, and she said, a lot of people are using those spots, but they can put up signs, but they can't give any fines or anything. So that's the city's job. So it seems like during, when ballots are being dropped, maybe a policeman going by and making sure that the people are just walking from their car to drop in their ballots, because other people are parking there and they know that nobody up there is going to give them a ticket for doing it. So they're parking just like the regular spots. And if you go up to drop your ballot off, there's no place to park. And so, like you were saying, the parking is a premium up there at certain times during the day. So it's at least a way to get some more money. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, please.
Thank you for your patience. I know you're tuckered. There's just a couple of things I wanted to bring up. One was thank you, Mr. Clausen, for the detailed report for the Finance Committee. And I had one question about that because I was in attendance as well, and it was around minute 29, and it was the statement that the city will need to revisit as a community how to fund government because the method we have now doesn't work. And I think it was projecting around 2018. And I know we've got like 3 sources of revenue, so that was kind of a red flag to me, wondering, you know, what are we looking at? And if we could have more dialogue on that, it would be really interesting to the public to kind of know what could be coming down the pike that way. And I also thought it was interesting to hear that we have roughly $1 million in the real estate excise tax fund that is unencumbered. So that was really good news for me to hear, and I just wanted to share that with everyone. My last comment was regarding what the gentleman said about Tracy, because I think he was talking about Perry, because I see that was on the thing. But I am wondering, could Tracy be made a one-way street? Possibly, and I would think it'd be running east, actually, come up Mitchell and zip around, for people that have to be close by in the area, and then the rest of the people could access Beach Drive through Alney or Retzel or something like that. No? I just thought that it might be a potential there. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, all right. If nobody objects, we'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you. Thank you all for being here.